Good morning, good afternoon, and namaste to everybody joining us today from across 12 time zones. My name is Mithun Vasantakumar, and I'm a geopolitical risk analyst with the global team at Midcat Advisory. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this conference on Emea Risks and Opportunities 2024, organized collaboratively by Midcat Advisory and Confluence Consultants. The Emea region has historically been observed to be not only a region of extreme complexity and diversity, but has also proven to be consequential for prospects of global peace and security and contiguity in logistics integrity for issues related to international trade. The complexity of the risk landscape in the region can be discerned from observing developments in the region in recent times, ranging from the developing situation between Israel and Iran to disruptive floods reported in arid cities such as Dubai a couple of days ago. It could not be wrong to surmise that developments observed in the region have as much bearing on global politics as much as global geopolitics influences developments in the EMEA region. Additional to this reality is this critical role of technology as a decisive factor in the region's evolving geo-economic and security prospects. Following this principle, we have three panels today with distinguished speakers. In the following order, the panelists will seek to discuss the interplay of global events in regional geopolitics, dive deep into regional risk nuances, and also discuss the role of technology as a critical aspect of business resilience. Before we begin, I would quickly walk you through the agenda for the day. We will begin our session with a keynote address by Lieutenant General Sudhir Sharma, Chairman, Midcat Advisory. This will be followed by our first panel discussion on global risk outlook for 2024, moderated by Lieutenant Colonel Sushil Pradhan, Executive Director and COO at Midcat Advisory. Following the first panel, we will have a demo of our in-house risk intel platform, datasurfer.ai, by Mr. Abhijit Korde, Product Manager at Midcat Advisory. We will then move on to our second panel discussion on EMEA Risk Review 2024, moderated by Ms. Shraddha Bhandari, Founder, Confluence Consultants. Following that, we will have a third panel discussion on technology, security, and resilience, moderated by Mr. Sandeep Sinha, Director, Risk Consulting and Managed Services, Midcat Advisory. This will be followed up by a summing of inferences and closing remarks. Additionally, I would like to inform all panelists that in the interest of to ensure that we stick to our time schedule, and also we have a bit of time at the end of each panel to take in questions by a lot of attendees for our conference. I will show with the show of my hand, I will show 5 minutes before the end of each session that we have 5 minutes remaining. Based on that, you can fine-tune your presentation, and so that in the interest of time, we can be on schedule. If you have any questions, I would also request you to put them on the Q&A box, which is separate from the chat box. We begin our session with the keynote address. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce Lieutenant General Sudhir Sharma, Chairman, Midcat Advisory. General Sharma is an acknowledged expert on strategy, defense, homeland, and corporate security. The General has held distinguished leadership assignments in India and abroad, including command of the largest field formation, head of logistics of Indian Army, and the distinguished position as military attaché to the United Kingdom. General Sharma also advises corporations, diplomatic, defense, and security think tanks, and mentors startups. He is also a speaker and author of repute and a strong votary of safe, secure, responsible, and sustainable development. General Sharma, it is a privilege to welcome you for the keynote address. Over to you for the address.
Thank you, Mithun. Thank you very much. And also a big hello to all my friends, some of them I know, and very, very distinguished panel, I must say, and I really look forward to hearing you all. I shall remain very brief because the subject that you people are talking about will be covered very well in the panel. My thoughts are that as the search for a new strategic equilibrium remains elusive, I think we are entering in an era of very pivotal in geopolitics in the world order. Not only is the world partially fractured, but I think it's transiting from one order to another order. I would call it a world more or less adrift. In this area, because of this, a huge amount of risks have been thrown up. I think never before in the last 20 years have I seen the kind of conflicts which are raging across the world today. And to name a few, just imagine, we'll never imagine that you would have an ongoing war in Europe, in Africa, in the Middle East, in Myanmar, in Chile, Yemen. I mean, I can name out 10 hotspots where actual war is raging and more than 10,000 people are dying in the year, which is the reason why which UN classifies them as war. That is the kind of thing which is happening in the world. It is because the world order has not yet found the equilibrium where it could have deadlifts with each other. And therefore, this push is going on for dominance with each other. Now, in the past 20 years also, you've seen a lot of wars. If you remember, 2014, the ISIS was really running amok in the Middle East. The complete area of Syria, Iran, all these areas which you're talking about was being hit very hard by the ISIS, and the Kurds were fighting. That has gone down. Afghanistan was on the boil, absolutely. That is the time which is going on there. India and China were at loggerheads on the borders which are taking place in that region. And so therefore, that was, an asymmetric war. And suddenly we got into a long war. We never thought after Second World War that the wars will last for 2 years. The Sudan war on 18th April completes, 15th April completes 1 full year. Ukraine war started on 26th of February, so it's 2 years plus. And October 7th, I would call it not the Israel-Hamas war, but the Middle East war has not extended over so many months. So we're in for a period of very long wars, which is surprising to me. Sorry, I've got a little bad throat. Now, US and China rivalry is also continuing, and the decoupling of economies and the logistic chain is also carrying on. Reconfiguration is going on, and therefore, that is also creating a lot of risks for the corporates and for the world. One deciding feature, I think, of the landscape, the future is going to be multipolarity. And in this multipolarity, lots of powerful countries, a lot of powerful actors are going to play a pivotal role in the complex global system. And here, some of the swing states come into play. The swing state terminology is picked up from the US swing state, but today we call India, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, and Indonesia. And these countries are swing states because whichever side they align to gets the balance of power shifting in their favor. And in that context, I want to draw your attention quickly to the BRICS. The way it is evolving, please keep that in mind because Emea region has got involved in BRICS in a big way. Today, Egypt, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Iran are all part of BRICS, beside the existing members of Russia, India, China. And about 15 countries of Africa have applied to become members of the BRICS. So this is going to become a big force or a big economic powerhouse, which will later on start threatening the other world order. So this is an area which we must watch out for as we discuss the region that we're talking about and we go forward and move forward to that area. So having come to that, let me come to the region specifically, the EME region. Now, Europe is in flames. Ukraine war, as you know, is continuing. I will not talk too much about it because too much has been said about it. My only perception is, I feel the Ukraine war is going to end not so well for Ukraine in the coming year. The things are not looking good. The point I want to make as a military man is that it's not that Ukraine is facing shortage of arsenal, equipment, munitions, and air defense equipment. It's the troops on the ground whose morale is gone. I think if you study carefully, and I've read some interviews with people there, all the soldiers on the ground who are running up to stand up in line to get conscripted are now rushing off to Poland and other places. I think they've lost the will to fight. Once a soldier loses the will to fight or desire to fight, then you bring him arms, ammunition, tanks, anything, that's not going to happen. So I think unless something happens dramatically, this war is going to go in slightly in favor of Russia. I think where the borders are, it will stand there and go there. We'll not talk too much about it. Sudan, forgotten war of Africa. It is now 1 year, and that's 10 million people have been moved out from the region also. And it's more or less in the stage of catastrophe where the famine is taking place. And the world is not paying much attention to that. And as a region that we're talking about, we must pay attention towards that region. Something happening in Malawi, something happening in Burkina Faso, Niger. All these places are, in big trouble. So the region is in trouble. Then we come to our own backyard, which is the Middle East. And I must tell you why Middle East is called. I would call it West Asia because it is the middle of Asia and Europe. And that's why it was called Middle East by the Europeans. UK termed the term Middle East because it was between Asia and Europe. They called it Middle. For us, it is West Asia, and for the rest of Asia, it's Southwest Asia. But it sits in the middle of the Asian continent and the European continent, so it's a very powerful, important place. And so everybody wants to be part of that. And what we've seen lately happening there with the war going place in Hamas, is all you know about. I don't want to talk too much about, but let's talk about this late Iran-Israel war. What happened really? Now, it was a very choreographed thing. I, as a military man, I was very amazed, astonished to hear that they informed 3 days in advance, we're going to attack you at this time, at this place, purely with a desire to keep the damage low. Excuse me. Also to limit the damage. Now, this doesn't happen ever. And countries like Jordan, Saudi, supposed to have supported them. Now, Western media says about 99% was a failure. My personal assessment after doing a lot of research on the sources which are there beyond the Western media, I think it was 90% failure and 10% success. Now, I'm qualifying 10% success because that's a significant number. Why? Because if you announce and go and openly use drones, etc., and then you will get a 7 to 10% success rate, it's a big achievement. It talks about the deterrence ability of Iran, which has to be countered by us in the future thinking that when we go through about it. Now, one area where they hit was the Nevatim Air Base. I'm told by very reliable sources that about 6 to 7 missiles have hit that place with not major damage, but slight damage that caused the airfield. This is the airfield from which the F-35s were taken off on 1st April to hit the embassy in Damascus. And it was clearly stated by Iran that we're going to hit those 4 places from where the 2 air bases from where they took off and the intelligence from Tel Aviv from where and they were able to hit all 3 of them slightly, if not too much. My point being that in future, if this escalatory ladder goes up, the chances of Iran being able to go through the dome and hit some more targets cannot be ruled out. And I think that is a dangerous area where we are entering very uncharted territory. Why this will happen, how it will happen, we do not know. Now, what will Israel do? I was just reading the latest news about a few hours ago. The UK Foreign Minister, Mr. Cameron, and the French have gone and met Netanyahu and given him lots of gyan and advice. And Mr. Netanyahu has come up on stage and said, look, thank you very much for a good advice, but we'll do what we have to do, saying that we will retaliate. And the reason for retaliation is twofold. The war cabinet is thinking about how they'll do it. Netanyahu's own political future rests upon this. Secondly, I don't think Netanyahu is the kind of person who allows a last word in military affairs to go to anybody else except him. So we could expect some kind of a response, and we hope the response is so measured that there is no counter response. But again, I said all bets are off. It's uncharted territory we're entering, and we're entering a difficult region. So what are the risks in this area, region then? Of course, I'll just touch upon the risk area. Obviously, oil prices will go up. 1/3 of the oil production is that place. And the transit routes of the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the global flow takes place, is right on the banks of backyard of Iran and where it's happening. So that's going to impact and delay, and a lot of diversion taking place already of airline. That is going to take place, and there's going to be delayed and take place. Another point is that this is not the end of the Iran and Israel conflict. This is just the opening salvo. I think it is not yet reached a logical conclusion. Israel does not want Iran to grow beyond a certain level, and Iran is determined to grow to a certain level to be able to counter Israel. So I think next stage of the war is also likely to happen. But the question you have to ask is why it happened. Why was this shadow boxing brought out in the open? They've been talking to each other. Proxies are being used. We all know about it, from the Hamas to the Hezbollah. Why remove the gloves and come in the open? I think what's happened is that Israel is targeting the Quds Force and the IRCG, the Revolutionary Guards of Iran, which are the mainstay or the beating heart of Iran's warrior. So if you notice, they've been attacking and killing the generals who are part of the IRCG and Quds forces, and same thing happened in Damascus also. So they take it out. And taking that out has created the kind of response from which Iran has hit. While they hit Hezbollah, they hit the Hamas, or they hit other people, the response from Iran has been, peripheral. It's been proxy war or outsourced war. But if you hit the Quds Force or hit the IRCG, then they have to respond purely because politically. So that will continue for some time to come. Now, this is an area where you have to enter. I think we are looking at a great risks for corporates in the world of the region that we're talking about, both Europe, Africa, and the Middle East region, in terms of lots of risk taking place physically. You're talking about prices, you're talking about inflation, you're talking about climate risk, you're talking about supply chain risk, you're talking about decoupling. All these risks will have to be factored in by all of you who are experts, and this is going to happen. I will end by saying that we really are entering an era of very great strategic uncertainty, And I believe that all the senior leaders of the world, from Mr. Biden and the future incoming president, Mr. Putin, are very concerned that it should be kept contained and should not go beyond, because it could be a starting of anything would happen there. I feel it will not for the time being, because it will not, but we can never know what could happen. So we all have to be very alert what's likely to happen in the future. So the region is very important for the world, and wish good luck to all of you. I'd like to hear all of you speaking, because very, very interesting subjects have been talked about today. Thank you very much, and please start.
Thank you, General Sharma, for setting a decisive tone via the keynote. All your points about the role of swing states, the changing dynamics in Israel and West Asia, and all of that, all well taken. Now we begin our first discussion on Global Risk Outlook 2024. The moderator for our first panel is none other than Lieutenant Colonel Sushil Pradhan, Executive Director and COO at MidCat Advisory. Lieutenant Colonel Sushil Pradhan is a seasoned professional with over 32 years of experience across challenging geographies from Myanmar to Iraq to several locations across India. His expertise has been showcased through publications and talks at cutting-edge security conferences in industry and strategic journals, alongside appearances as a security expert on national television. Additionally, he's also a highly sought-after security professional known for conducting crisis simulation exercises for corporate management teams. Lieutenant Colonel Pradhan holds an MBA, an MSc in Defense and Strategic Studies, and an MPhil in National Security Studies, additional to his illustrious military career spanning 22 years, marked by gallantry awards in counter-terror operations, specialized training in commando operations, counterinsurgency, and extensive services in the Himalayan high altitudes. Notably, he also has served as UN peacekeeper in Sierra Leone, West Africa, earning recognition with the prestigious UN medal. Furthermore, his contributions extend to training international UN peacekeepers at the United Nations Training Center and at the German Army as well. Over to you, Mr. Colonel Pradhan.
Thank you so much. Thank you, General Sharma, for setting the tone for the discussions going forward this afternoon and this evening and this morning for those who are in the respective time zones. I would like to jump straight into the panel discussion, but before that, I need to introduce my illustrious panelists to all of you, and I'll request you all to just wave out or say hello to the audience once I've introduced you. So in no particular order, let me start with Dr. David Rubens, who's a recognized authority in risk and crisis management. He's got about 30 years of experience, currently the Executive Director of the Institute of Strategic Risk Management, and he's the Managing Director and CEO of Delta Training Solutions as well. He holds a doctorate in security and risk management from the University of Portsmouth, and he's got extensive experience in academia and leading programs on strategic risk and crisis management. He's also a member of the UK National Preparedness Commission, and he's founded impactful organizations like the IRSM and the Center for Study of Wicked Problems. So, hello to you, Dr. Rubens. Good morning. Welcome to this discussion.
Thank you, Sushil. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
We also have Mr. Lloyd Figgins, who's the CEO of Travel Risks and Incident Prevention Group and the former overseas security advisor to the British government. With experience in operating in over 80 countries, including some of the world's most dangerous and challenging regions, he's developed a deep understanding of the complexities of geopolitics. Lloyd is author of Travel Survival Guide, and he regularly provides expert commentary for the world's media. And I have been interacting with him and meeting him and hearing him talk for many, many years. And believe me, some of his stories are truly unbelievable. Thanks, Lloyd, for joining us here.
It's an absolute pleasure, Sushil. Good to see you again, and really hoping to add something to this great panel.
We have Farah London is the regional head of at MidCat Advisory, based in London. She's a dame to the International Knightly Order variant of St. George. She's also the Deputy Commander of the Order St. George London branch, Freeman of the City of London, and mayoral candidate for the Mayor of London elections in 2021 as an independent candidate. She's a visionary entrepreneur with over 24 years of corporate and entrepreneurial experience. She continues to drive successful initiatives across 6 continents in global trade and investment. And believe me, it's very hard to keep track of where she is on any particular day and in which continent she is on any particular day. So thanks, Farah, for joining us, and we hope to listen to your words of advice and interest as well.
Thank you, Sushil. I am in London today, so I'm back in London. But thank you for having me. Looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you. We have Rachel Spenton, who started her career in the Surrey Police, where she worked as an intelligence analyst, focusing primarily on serious organized crime. She then moved to BP, where she spent 10 years in roles that ranged from advising the business on geopolitical threats in Africa, establishing and heading up BP's industry-leading operational intelligence program, before running and revolutionizing the company's 24/7 intelligence monitoring and analysis center. She founded Victoria Intelligence in 2024 to support corporate clients and build their own world-class intelligence programs. So welcome, Rachel. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Sushil. Excited to be here.
We have the last speaker on the panel, Malcolm. Malcolm Smith is currently the Emergency and Crisis Management Director at RCU. He's got more than 20 years of experience. He's an security industry leader across several industries: oil and gas, FMCG, banking, property, finance, aviation security, and government. He's also a member of HSSC leadership teams. He is qualified and skilled in crisis management, business continuity, auditing in a technical environment, government compliance, critical infrastructure, and what have you. And he also possesses the legal background to interpret regulatory frameworks. He's got more than 8 years of experience working and living in the Middle East region. So welcome to the discussion, Malcolm.
Thank you for having me here, and thank you for the kind introduction. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. So with that, I'll start off the first. We'll have a quick round of preliminary questions to all the panelists, and going forward, we'll see how much time we have left, and accordingly, we will have secondary questions. So Farah, just to set the tone of this panel discussion, the first question comes to you. They say that in 2024, geoeconomics is driving geopolitics, but is it the other way around? What would you say so, and how can you give an example or two in your understanding of this phenomenon?
Thank you, Sushil. Absolutely. Geopolitics and geoeconomics are actually entwined. Because one thing we have to understand is no matter what conflicts or geotension is going on between two nations, they need a drive of economics, and trade will always flow. And, perfect example, if we look at China and US, we can say for a number of years, US has been very vocal on its position and standpoint with China. It has restricted a lot of business with China, for example, with the chips. So China has been affected. However, saying all of that, what we see geopolitically, if we actually just look at last year in 2023, the trade between China and the US surpassed 575 billion. Now, that doesn't sound like two countries who are standoff with each other, don't want to work with each other. They very much so are working together. In fact, they're working so much together that the US imported 427 billion from China to the US. So that shows that there is very strong trade relations. But let's talk about Vietnam. Now, Vietnam, I was actually just there 2 days ago. Vietnam and China obviously are having very close relations. President Xi went to Vietnam after 6 years to re-establish that relationship. Now, I heard from the Deputy Prime Minister himself, and they are very keen to welcome that investment from China, that technology, that that investment that they need to help build Vietnam. Because Vietnam is somewhere, 30, 50 years ago where China was. But at the same time, Vietnam is having very strong relations with the US and is now starting to export a lot to the US. Now, why this dynamic is quite interesting, because usually countries, especially developing nations, when they start having close relationships with the US, they then start distancing themselves from China because it's the influence that they get from the US. But that's not happening in Vietnam. Vietnam is working openly with China and openly with the US. One perfect example, I will give you is Romania. I was just in Romania yesterday. Now, what's interesting is Romania has a lot of interest from China. China wants to invest heavily into Romania. But because Romania is trying to build its relations with US, it's slightly taken a back step towards that in interest from China. But what is interesting, how the geopolitical tension from the war in Ukraine has actually helped Romania. Where there is war, there's always opportunity. Now, I was talking to the mayor of Galatai yesterday, and we were talking about the Port Authority. The Port Authority of Galatai is one of the largest in Romania. Because of the conflict in Ukraine, they have had everything predominantly rerouted into the Port of Galatai, which has actually flourished the industry there. And it's done so well that now the mayor was explaining to me that they're looking to build those relationships for other shipping routes with other nations, for example, the Middle East and other European cities. They really want to expand their port. But that has all happened due to the diversion of the war in Ukraine. So it just shows you how geopolitics and geoeconomics are really entwined together globally.
Thank you. So I guess there's no clear-cut answer which drives which, but it's really good to hear about the interdependence of both. And going forward, I'm sure we'll see, as General Sharma also mentioned, that new strategic equilibrium is still elusive. We haven't reached a stage where countries could say that, okay, these people are my friends and these people are not, because on some levels they are friends, on some levels they are antagonistic to each other. But thanks a lot for that broad overview. David, based on some of these issues, do you think that our general understanding of risk management, especially in the corporate sector, has it adapted and progressed in line with the changing nature of risks we are currently facing and the ones that we are likely to be facing in the current years?
I think it's a question, Sushil, that we're all struggling with. I think everybody gets up in the morning opening up their media feeds with absolutely no idea what's going to be greeting them as they do so. And that's even before, of course, we factor in a potential Trump second presidency from later this year or beginning of next year, which will undoubtedly, whatever it might be, will be destabilizing. But I think the fundamental nature of the world we're living in right now is one of flux and change. And I think the fundamental question is, how do we model that change? Is that change evolutionary? Is it natural? Is it the world has always been in flux and change? Is it revolutionary in that, are we seeing the destruction or the collapse of the institutes which have basically set the framework for us, certainly since the end of the Second World War? Or are we actually seeing mutational change in that we are moving into a period where the models of risk that we've had and which have allowed us to rationalize the world we live in actually do not work anymore? And that's true both in the natural world. We're saying, we saw in Dubai, 1 year's worth of rain in one day. Dubai got taken out. We saw that in Houston, Texas, a couple of years ago. A snowstorm took out basically Houston, Texas, the 4th largest city in America, Texas, the 9th largest economy in the world, got taken off grid in 3 days by a snowstorm that was not particularly bad by other people's standards. Farah mentioned China. I'm sure that many people, some people, certainly those with a defense or security background, will be aware of the integrated review, the UK's government's integrated review into security and defense. But that identified China as the single most significant strategic risk to the UK. It identified Chinese agencies as being aggressive in their actions in the UK, targeting both Chinese nationals, and of course, as far as they're concerned, every Chinese national belongs to them wherever they are in the world. We see that in the way that they are dealing with our academic institutions, and to a large extent funding them, whether it's through students or through bilateral research programs. We see it in their becoming increasingly embedded into our critical national infrastructure as critical national infrastructure suppliers. And so I think the question really is, how do we model that? And for those of us, when you introduced us, those are big numbers, 20, 30 years doing this sort of stuff. And the skill that we bring, the skill that we as so-called people who have expertise in this, is that we can do a single fundamental thing. We can observe and learn from the past. We can build an intellectual model of the present. But most importantly, we can project into the future. There is a continuity, there's a rationality to that. And there is a word that has come into our lexicon over the last 10 years, which I think is challenging that model. And that is unprecedentedness. And if we claim that the problems we're facing are unprecedented, what that means is that that model of observing the past, modeling the future, present, and projecting the future is breaking down. Some people think it is. Some mornings I get up and I think it is. Some mornings I get up and I'm not quite sure. But what I do believe is that the value that we, as so-called experts, people with insight into this, we have is pattern recognition. That although the individual events might be unique and of their time, the underlying tensions and the underlying interactions that they have and the way that one deals with it, that we have to bring some rationality to it. And the way we do that is through pattern recognition. So I have no doubt that we are coming into challenging times, whether it's social, economic, political, whether it is climate change, whether it is infrastructure failure, whether it is infrastructure fragility, whether it is satellite dependency. All of these things create more fragility, more resilience. But I also believe, Sushil, that it is not beyond the capability of people represented by MidCat, by the people on these panels, by the global audience, as you said, of 199 people I now see on my screen. It is not beyond our capability to rationalize and engage with this in a rational way. But can I please say, for my final point, if we are to do so, we have to respect one fundamental rule. Stop doing stupid stuff. And humanity is not good at stopping doing stupid stuff, to be honest. And if we do stupid stuff, there's going to be trouble. But if we are managed to stop doing stupid stuff, then I have hope that actually we can bring some engagement to the game, which will have significance and impact.
Thank you so much, David. And I hope that the guys who are supposed to stop doing the stupid stuff do stop, because all of us here are more into what you rightly said as pattern recognition, and that will help us to hone our risk management skills. And I liked what you said about getting up in the morning and not knowing what's in the media. And that leads me on to the question to Malcolm. Malcolm, threat intelligence and risk intelligence have become a significant decision points for multinational businesses. In today's world, we have too much information. How do you suggest organizations can cut through the clutter to understand what affects them most, how to make sense of all of this information? Over to you, Malcolm.
So thank you for that question. I mean, let's start off first. Good intelligence, and in this case, we talk about threat intelligence, is mainly related to making data-driven business decisions. And in our world, informed risk decisions. Because, I mean, knowledge is power. Without that, you are basically facing the dark. We know in war, knowing your enemy sets you apart. In business, knowing your competitor places you ahead. Knowing your customer needs and wants gives you that added advantage. So intelligence, of course, has a key role to play in making informed decisions. And here we don't talk about, in the Middle East or in Europe, the MI6s or the KGBs or the Mossads. We talk about how we as risk professionals within organizations deal with threat intelligence. Now we've had that experience. The COVID era brought a lot of experts. You remember that as soon as COVID hit, and TikTok, and we could read different perspectives, and it really clouded our minds as to what is this really about? Because the one expert come up with these ideas and so forth, and you had to, of course, advise your business what's the right thing to do under that circumstances. We've seen also what is happening right now with video shopping and identity shopping. You see a picture or you see a script, And it's not the person speaking. It's not Trump speaking there. It's somebody that's just stimulating his speech. How can you then take that information and go to your organization and say, this is what we need to do based on this intelligence? So it really brings, that dark. And talking about the storm in Dubai, I just had a conversation with someone this morning, and he said, you know what? The messages are already going through. This rain is caused because of cloud seeding. Maybe, maybe not. So what is now the case here is that people will spread the news that it's cloud seeding that caused this heavy rain in the maybe, but maybe not. So with social media, search engines, with a click of button, you have access to all of this information. But what is real? That's the question. What is real that you can take with and share that with your organizations to make informed decisions? And it comes down to this. How do you know what you know? How do you know what you don't know? Or put it differently, how don't you know what you know? Or don't know what you don't know? So it's me, I say, stick to the basics. Just go back to follow, the basic, what we call intelligence cycle, by starting with planning, right? You need to know as your organization, what's the strategy of organization? So that's the starting point, the plan, so that you know what to really dig into and find. I remember when I was working for Shell in South Africa, Shell wanted to access the Karoo Basin for the shale gas project. And of course, that actually drove the intelligence gathering. What are the threats out there in the shale gas that they may face from the community? What are the things that we need to know at that point in time to take the position whether we're going to enter or not? So it starts there with real planning, meaning what is the strategic objectives of the organization? That's where it starts, right? And of course, now you have to go gather. Gone through all this planning, knowing what you need, what intelligence you need, and then gather it, of course, from credible sources. Now, what is credible and relevant sources depends on how you view it. I mean, whether you would see, the BBC is a credible source, but you may dig deeper and say, yes, it might be the organization as a credible source, but who's the journalist actually providing that data? So I remember speaking to one of my Lebanese colleagues when I asked, how's it really in Lebanese at this point? Because the media is shooting out this, and I find him as a credible source. And he said, you know what? The media is just blowing it up. It's not that bad. We go our everyday lives and so forth. But you know what? I thought to myself, yes, it is contradicting to what the media state. But again, although he's a credible source, perhaps he is blindsided by the environment and it becomes second nature that he don't even see that it's real, danger. So you can also get clouded. So you have to work through, what is real and what is not. But a key point of this in the second and the third step of your process or your cycle is intelligence analysis. Analysis, whether it's descriptive or predictive analysis, you have to analyze and filter it through to basically get to make meaning out of that information. Then the last step is to share, accordingly with your organization. So this is the basics. And I think all of us understand this. That's why I go back to the basics. I'm not really giving advice on going on to using AI and using all of these kind of tools to basically filter it down. It's just getting back to the basic things that we have to do, because it's about really being curious. You have to investigate the mindset as to where did it originate, why is it said so, and how does it then collaborate with your network. Network is important in your credible sources so that it's fact-based, that you can use that information back to your organization. So in essence, it is about really knowing what the organization need and then go through the process of filtering it through and provide through your funneling the organization the correct fact-based intelligence so that the business can make informed decisions or risk decisions. So that's how I would say it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. And I think very rightly said, although you really confused me, at least, with your knows and don't knows, and but eventually I think you got around to what is really a great takeaway for all of us. Stick to the basics, go back to the intelligence cycle, try and figure out what you need to know, and then figure out how you're going to get that information authenticated, analyze, and predict. So I think thank you for that, and we'll come back to you for something more subsequently. I'm just going to shift track a bit now and move to Rachel, because we've been speaking about generics, about the world order, geopolitics, risks, and intelligence. One of the major issues which the world looks at from the perspective of the Middle East, and I'm not trying to hijack anything from the second panel, which is purely about the Middle East, but energy security is something which plays a major role in the Middle East region. So, Rachel, just wanted to understand your viewpoint on this, that energy security will continue to be a deciding factor for countries and companies. How will this unfold in the coming year? And which are the industries that are most severely affected by all of these complications?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And clearly it's a big topic to cover, so I'll just choose a couple of examples. And I think I'll also break it down into a bit of like a good news, bad news story, because obviously there's a lot of concerning developments, but a few more positive trends to highlight as well. So yeah, I'll start with how the Israel-Gaza war will impact. I'll focus on shipping of oil products through the Straits of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb, and in terms of how it will impact this negatively, which I think will surprise no one. So in the Bab el-Mandeb, we'll see a continuation of Iranian-backed Houthis continuing to fire rockets at vessels transiting through that they consider legitimate targets, either because they're linked to Israel or more likely they're just within range. There hasn't been a whole lot of sophisticated targeting that we've seen. So really any vessels transiting through the strait could be at risk. And this is why you've seen like so many companies just stop going through there, like Shell and BP have stopped transiting through there, and it's unlikely they're going to resume anytime soon. And then in the Straits of Hormuz, we're probably going to see a bit of a continuation of Iran using their tactic of seizing vessels linked to adversaries as their way of showing their displeasure in the region, and also kind of throwing their weight around. They've done this with the US in the past, and then just this week we saw them seize an Israeli-linked container ship as part of their response to Israel's attack on their consulate in Damascus. And so we'll continue to see that this waterway and vessels transiting through it will remain vulnerable to actions by Iran, and they'll use it as a tactic to kind of punish them, that they punish those they see as hurting their country's interests. But I don't really feel like we're seeing Iran want to escalate things like unnecessarily. It's in their interest to keep the strait open as much as they can. But obviously, like if there is retaliation from Israel or their allies, it is a tool that they can use to sort of disrupt shipping here. And also, like the strait is really very narrow, so it doesn't take a whole lot to stop it. Like if a couple of vessels are damaged or they sort of block it, so that's a ongoing risk, I would say. And I'll pivot away from shipping, and I will just touch on Russia, Ukraine really briefly, just because in terms of energy security globally, it's a pretty big factor. So we've seen both sides target energy infrastructure of the other. So Ukraine has disrupted like 10% of Russia's oil refineries, and Russia's destroyed it's half of Ukraine's thermal power generation. They've taken away access to 90% of Ukraine's wind farm and occupy the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And I want to just mention the nuclear power plant briefly because it's especially bruising to Ukraine. Before the war, Ukraine got most of its, a lot of its a lot of its power from nuclear energy, and the Zaporizhzhia power plant was the biggest producer of nuclear energy in the country, and that's been offline since March 2022. The power plant's also become a fairly concerning pawn in the war, with both sides blaming the other for frequent shelling, and it's really just becoming a bit of a nuclear accident waiting to happen. And we've seen moves by the US to try and encourage Ukraine to halt their attacks on Russia energy infrastructure, partly because of fears of what it will do to global energy prices, but also because it doesn't seem to be a hugely beneficial tactic for Ukraine. Russia just ends up then retaliating and damaging Ukraine's energy infrastructure even more. Although Ukraine doesn't really seem to be listening, they launched attacks on Russia's energy infrastructure subsequently. But it's not all bad news. So there are some positive stories to look at as well and to consider. And I'll start in Ukraine. So despite the attacks on Ukraine's energy systems, it being 2 years into a war, it's continuing to make positive steps towards integrating its energy sector with Europe. It's something it began several years ago. And this is good news for Europe, obviously, depending on what happens with the Ukraine war. But Ukraine's nuclear energy expertise and capacity is really very good. So Europe stands to benefit from increased access to this. And it's obviously good news for Ukraine if they're able to pivot and exploit the European market. And also because of instability in the oil and gas markets and general disruption to the supply chain by geopolitical events, we're seeing sort of ramping up of moves towards renewables, and lots of countries who have access to water, to sun, to wind are starting to build those things closer to home because they're a bit more reliable. So despite some exceptions over the last few years, over the last kind of like few months, we have seen oil prices have remained surprisingly stable. And this is probably from a number of reasons, but one of them is diversification of supply. So we're seeing people move away from reliance on Middle East oil and gas and opening up new markets like Guyana, for example. That's really been ramping up production. We've seen their daily output increase, I think about 50% this year compared to last year. And also despite whether you think this is a good or a bad news story, despite Western sanctions on Russia, they've proved very agile in pivoting their flows to India and China. So generally, global supply hasn't been hit as well. So I will pause there. I think I've spoken for too long, but just generally, I think the outlook is obviously there's some concerning developments in the Middle East, but the global markets and companies and countries have shown a willingness to adapt and shore up production closer to home and explore new energy markets to kind of mitigate against these threats.
Thank you, Rachel. You touched upon shipping, nuclear energy, renewable energy to some extent. Just one line, if you could add about pipelines and their security, because gas pipelines and oil pipelines across the European region and West Asia are very, very critical to the overall energy security network in the world.
Yeah, so again, they're always going to be like a viable target for anyone sort of showing displeasure. And we've seen kind of how the disruption to the Nord Stream 2 can just like take off quite a lot of production very quickly. So, and they're very hard to secure, right? They're very long, they're hard to sort of maintain security across the whole pipeline. So I think they'll remain like a target for different actors. But again, it's hard to predict exactly where they might happen. And it is as much as possible in people's interest to kind of keep the oil flowing. But again, we'll see people use it as a target if they decide that they want to kind of disrupt production.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Rachel. And again, I'm going to change track. Farah said initially that countries will continue to do business with each other despite the geopolitical issues. So Lloyd, while doing this business, they're going to be traveling to all over the world and to countries which may not be friendly to them, but they still need to do business with either with those countries or companies which are based in those companies, or they have commercial interest in those companies. How do you see the business travel and global operations for travel? People have also started working remotely and on vacations. How do you think companies are going to integrate their business plan with travel security and come out with effective travel risk strategies?
Well, this is a really interesting question because, COVID-19 was one of those events that was, as David related to earlier, was unprecedented. We hadn't ever come across something like this in the past. And, what it did was actually mitigate travel risk because no one was traveling, therefore there was no risk. And so almost like job done. Now, the problem is when we come out of this, they're going back to one of the other things that we were talking about earlier was about good news, bad news. The good news that came out of COVID is, yes, it stopped travel for the best part of 2 years. But coming out of it, what it did do was put travel and travel risk at the top of many companies' agendas, particularly when looking after the safety and welfare of their traveling staff. Now, that has continued, and we have seen a massive rise, and I'm sure you have at MidCat, in consultancy work in order to make sure that people can travel safely. But, David's point as well was about when we look at risk and how we are evolving and how we need to evolve with risk. This goes to travel as well, because traditionally people have given a purpose for going on a trip. They've booked their flight, they've gone, and actually they've given very little concern to what those travel risks should be. But for me, the advice would remain the same. So organizations, first of all, they need to look at the purpose of that journey. Another thing that COVID showed us is we can actually conduct business online and actually do it pretty effectively, because the world did it for at least 18 months. But there's nothing like that face-to-face interaction. And so we will always have people traveling between different countries. But the first thing is we must understand what is the purpose of that travel. And is the purpose of that travel, does that involve any risk factors? And particularly, as you say, Sushil, with the countries that might not be necessarily politically friendly with one another, but business still continues. So what are the security risks to those travelers going ahead? So as I say, first thing, purpose of travel. Is it absolutely necessary? Do we need to go? Then we need to start looking at what the threats are. And obviously people, talk about the difference between threat and risk, but, we look at, again, what happened in Dubai the other day, that is an environmental threat that wasn't foreseen. But, it could have happened and it can happen pretty much anywhere. The environment is changing. So environmental risk or environmental threats are something that we now need to consider. So we need to do those threat assessments. We need to include everything you would usually include within that threat assessment, including the geopolitical situation, making sure that we're looking at geohazards or environmental risks, and all the things associated there. And then we need to do a proper travel risk assessment. And I think that this is where a lot of companies fall down. They tend to go with a tick box exercise, which is not an effective travel risk assessment process. And so there needs to be a lot more rigor applied to travel risk assessments. And that encompasses and includes things like journey management plans, particularly in those higher risk locations. How are people getting from A to B? What accommodation are they staying in? What are the timings of those journeys? So all of these things go into the mix. And, when we talk about security risk, there's two really key factors that we must apply a lot more rigor to. One is transportation, whether that's air transportation, land or sea, and what transport are we putting people on? What are the safety procedures that are in place for that, and also accommodation. And how secure is that accommodation for a variety of different events? And it doesn't have to be, the sort of showstopper events like terrorism or anything else like that, but something as simple as what are the fire evacuation procedures? What do companies have in place for that as well? And all too often, these are the sorts of things that are overlooked when we are booking accommodation. But those two factors, transportation and accommodation, everyone has to get from A to B, so they have to use transportation, and everyone has to stay somewhere. So transportation and accommodation are really the key areas that we need to be focusing on, as well as those wider security issues, which could include things like espionage, it could include things like criminality and so on. And then we need to look at our evacuation plans. So I, have been involved in evacuations. We talked earlier about Niger. We talked about, what's happening in Sudan. And I know that, from a British government point of view, evacuations from those did come down ultimately to, certainly for the UK, for the British government to necessitate those evacuations using military assets and military airframes. Now, not every situation is going to allow for that. And what we have seen with civil unrest and political insecurity in a lot of countries is it happens exceptionally quickly. And I remember, being caught up in a coup many years ago in Madagascar, and it went from civil unrest to a curfew to the airport being closed and not reopening for another 3 weeks. And if I hadn't have got out when I did, I would have been trapped in that location for 3 weeks. So then you've got to start looking about, with our evacuation plans, are we evacuating? Are we, invacuating, i.e., staying safe in place? Are we moving and hibernating in another location? And all of these factors have to go into your travel risk management strategy. And then finally, we need to look at the emergency response plans that are in place. What happens if somebody gets robbed? What happens if they have a medical incident whilst they're overseas? What happens if the political situation changes? So it's not just a one size fits all. As David said, risk is evolving, and we as risk managers, we have to evolve with it. And I think that moving into the future, again, when we look at we've got elections coming up in India and in the next few days, and we've already had elections in a lot of countries around the world, and we've got a major election coming up in the US. I don't think that there will be a massive change, even with the wars in Ukraine and what's happening in the Middle East. I don't think that there's going to be a massive change in how people travel at the moment. Moving towards the end of 2024 and into 2025, I think that there could be significant changes in how we manage the safety and security of travelers based on some of the political change that we're likely to see towards the end of this year and moving into 2025.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. Very, very comprehensively covered. I think one of the new emerging risks for travelers is going to be identity theft as an outcome of data theft. And that's something which we need to start looking at very, very seriously, where people have had their identities taken over and impersonated by someone, and they become virtually persona non grata in the country that they are visiting. And we've heard some scary stories. I have a couple of questions for some of the other panelists with the time that we have left. But Lloyd, I want you to give me one latest travel horror story, because I've read your book and I've heard a lot of your stories. I just need to hear one more in a minute. That's all.
Well, you know, I was recently in Istanbul, and of course, Ramadan recently came to an end. And with all the best intention of the world, I thought I'd do a little bit of sightseeing. Went down to the Spice Bazaar in Istanbul, and of course everybody was out. It was holiday time, and included within the people who are out were the criminal fraternity. And it was just very interesting to watch the group dynamics and an actual lack of situational awareness that people have particularly when they're in a crowded space. They become part of a crowd, and so they're no longer an individual. They just do what the crowd was doing. Apart from the criminals who are actually going in between, they're taking handbags, you know, they're picking pockets and all these sorts of things. And again, it's just one of those things that for me, and you've read the book, you'll know that situational awareness, making sure that you are situationally aware, is going to do you more favors than anything else when you're traveling overseas. Because when we travel, we have, particularly if it's a place we haven't been to before, we have no baseline of normal. We don't know what is normal in that new environment. So we have to take a little bit of time to discover that. So that means that we must obviously be on our guard as much as possible. But Istanbul was a bit of an eye-opener with regards to that side of things.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. And folks, I do recommend that you should read his book. It's really great, and I've read it a couple of times already. So we have time for a couple of short questions. And Rachel, could you just based on your intelligence analyst, with the rapidly shifting supply chains, there's been a disruption. There have been attempts to shift supply chains from the standard ones to the new ones. What's your take on this? How successful it is going to be, and which are the critical supply chains? And again, brings us back to that original touch point, which Farah mentioned about countries continuing to do business with each other, but finding innovative ways to do it in.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, besides like shipping is a big one, and actually like shipping through those sort of key trade routes isn't just oil, it's like cargo as well. So basically anyone that wants to ship anything from retail to automotive to mining is going to see disruption to their supply chains. And I think also what we're starting to see is a move for companies who want to become less reliant on the global supply chains and sort of move production a little bit closer to home. So this could see companies move facilities closer to the customers, or we're seeing countries produce products that they never really cared about before, like cotton linters in Europe, which has historically been something that we just got from China because it's quite cheap to produce. And we're now realizing that we don't want to be as reliant on China as we was. And cotton linters are important because they're a key component in nitrocellulose, I think I'm pronouncing wrong, which is a key component in artillery shells. So we're kind of realizing that these things that maybe in the short term won't make us money will be kind of expensive to produce, but actually longer term they reduce the risk. So we're kind of, companies I think want a bit of an easier life, so they might lose a bit of money in the short term, but having that longer term reliability I think is quite attractive to people. So I think we'll see that kind of shifting of things that maybe are a bit less economically efficient closer to home, but less reliant on the global supply chain.
Thank you. Thanks, Rachel. And Malcolm, there have been some technology shifts due to geopolitical realignments. Just a quick one on how this is going to play out in the coming year.
I mean, look, with the introduction of Industry 4.0, it introduced really a new phase of relationships between technology and geopolitics. I mean, advanced technologies and capabilities are now at the forefront of regional and global rivalry, or even coordination. It's all integrated. You know, tech drives politics and geopolitics drive tech. Both increases, tensions. But when we witness currently the nature of US-China relationships, technology is not just economic competition. It's central to national pride. I mean, you can see the pride when they have their conversations. It's strategic influence and geopolitical power at the end of the day. But it doesn't need to create, regional or global rivalry. Technology is actually, that's why the World Economic Forum asked members of the Global Future on Geopolitics to offer their views of the impact technology will have on geopolitics. But it requires really to decide what's critical to economic growth and the associated risks that are linked to technology. I think our regional players need to agree on, norms and rules to accelerate the benefits that you can actually get out of it. But in the same time, mitigating the risk, because it's global. It's really there's no line barrier when it comes to technology. They should also then, as regional, global politics, a mechanism to basically increase coordination and collaboration. And the private sector is key, because the nations is not standing alone. They need to include private sector, who is basically part of the engine, and then to share data. It's an easy call to say, let's share data, let's share common standards and technology and infrastructure, but it needs to happen, because there's a great impact if we don't. I take the example of the Green Technology Partnership in the Middle East between two former rivals. It now demonstrates how innovation can serve as a means for strengthening nation states coordination. So I think, all in all, it's all good out there. Good competition is healthy. It needs to be there, but there needs to be ways to find, to basically work together towards it.
Thank you, Malcolm. And I think, we'll leave some of that discussion to the third panel, where they're going to talk a lot about technology, and West Asia is one place which is really booming in the technology sector. Sorry, Farah, just a quick one. Since I have met you, you've just been continent hopping. And in terms of the concern about cybersecurity, what do you see as the underlying threat that businesses, governments are all worried about in that field? From the perspective, I won't say private players, I'll say state-sponsored cyber threats. What is your opinion? Just a quick one before we sort of close the panel.
Actually,
sorry.
Sorry, Malcolm, go ahead. You want to say something?
No, I'm just, sorry, thank you.
No problem. So this is a big concern, especially from the government-facing side. And we were talking yesterday at security conference about this topic, and there is a much need for government departments to actually work together and share intelligence. And that means from the police to the Foreign Office, because they may not be connected, and they really need to find a way to work together. Because obviously, you've got the crime, but the police are actually seeing the cyber terrorism, and then you've got more from a higher level. So if anything, we need to ensure that governments are working closely together, but also governments need to be sharing information cross-border to counter cyber terrorism, because obviously it's a global threat. So we do need to have task force set up globally where they are openly sharing intelligence from some of the major threats, wherever we talk about North Korea. That is a significant threat globally. So we need to see a lot more interchange. But another thing that's come up is regulation. There needs to be regulations put in place. We are very weak right now on regulations for cyber terrorism and threats around the world. So we do need to see open coordination, especially talking about AI. Malcolm made some incredible points earlier. What do we see? What don't we see? So without regulation and without countries working closely together to combat cyber terrorism, unfortunately, there will be heightened risk. So we need to make sure that we push on these close relationships globally.
Thanks, Farah. Thank you. David, just one quick one or two lines from you, because you talked about pattern recognition. With the current ongoing conflicts in the world, do you see any major transformations to these conflicts in this year? Very, very quickly. I mean, we won't go into the how and whys of it.
I think very quickly, I think there's two aspects to it. One is those who have an emotional involvement, just like America has an emotional involvement in Ukraine or in Israel, Gaza. I think the other main thing is the China influence. We've discussed in Africa, for example. China has absolutely no emotional impact, no involvement in that. They don't have a dog in the fight. They just want chaos and instability. And in that aspect, they're definitely winning. We're seeing in Africa sort of the old Wagner group coming in play, the fact that they are now becoming absolute global disruptors. And I think that we need to have a way of responding to that. Farah mentioned global regulation and collaboration. We haven't seen that in any way. We've seen, I think, the other way. I think we've been sort of the breakdown of those global things. Cyber regulation. Rishi Sunak, the British Prime Minister, recently said that he was against that because it basically it helped stop innovation, which he wanted Britain to be at the heart of. I think COVID was a real opportunity to see if we could, as humanity, we could come together and deal with these human level problems. And the answer was we couldn't. And I don't see anything significant changing in that, Sushil, in the foreseeable future.
Thank you so much, all of you. And I'll just take a one line sound bite from all of you as a takeaway, as a piece of advice from you to risk managers. Just a quick one. So going round robin, Farah, what would you say?
Check your insurance policies. I would definitely tell people with everything that's going on, check your insurance policies, make sure they're up to date, make sure you've got geographical cover, because insurance in these changing times is critical.
Thank you so much. Malcolm, what about you? What's your key takeaway? One sentence to the risk managers and the audience.
I mean, it's all about making the business win, the competitive advantage. So stick to that line and you are good to go. Thanks.
Thank you. Rachel, what about you? What do you suggest?
Yeah, I'd say like try and challenge your assumptions as much as possible. Like surround yourself with people that agree with you and disagree with you, and try and keep a really wide aperture to avoid kind of falling into groupthink and things like that. And that'll give you the best chance for staying informed and having an accurate view of the world.
Thank you. Stay informed. Yeah, Lloyd, what about you?
Don't ignore espionage as a travel risk. It's real, it's here, and it's going to get worse.
Wow, thanks. That's a big one to watch out for. And the last one, David, from you.
Two things you should do, absolutely. One is buy my book on risk management. If anything else is, be fast learning. Just be fast learning. The world needs everybody to be fast learning. So be fast learning. That's the thing you can bring to the table.
Thanks, David. And when you come to India, get some copies of your book along. We'll make sure we have people buying them. Okay, thank you so much, Farah, Malcolm, Rachel, Lloyd, David. It's been a pleasure speaking to all of you. And thank you so much for your very candid and very straightforward comments and great examples that you all shared with the audience. I'm sure there have been wonderful takeaways. So thanks to all of you. Please give a big round of applause, everyone, to all of you.
Thank you, everybody. Cheers.
Thanks, Mithun. Over to you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Sushil. So before we move on to the next session, I think we have time for a few questions. So if anybody has a specific question.
Mithun, I think we'll jump to the demo and the panelists are around so they can put questions on the Q&A box because I don't want to eat into the time of the next panel.
Absolutely, we could do that.
Okay.
So thank you all panelists, and thank you Lieutenant Colonel Sushil Pradhan for such a thought-provoking session. Now, moving on, we now have a special presentation of MidCat's new proprietary AI-driven product, DataSurfer.ai, which effectively combines technology with human intelligence for risk monitoring and analysis. This will be done by Mr. Abhijit Korde. He is the product manager at MidCat Advisory and holds a bachelor's in engineering in mechanical engineering from the University of Pune and a master's degree in international relations from the London School of Economics. In his role, Abhijit spearheads the creation of diverse information service products, both technological and non-technological. His focus is on tailoring these products to meet our clients' needs for essential intelligence, ensuring seamless business operations. Over to you, Abhijit.
Thank you, Mithun. Thank you, Mithun. I would like to share my screen. Just let me know when you can see the presentation. Yeah, is it visible?
Yeah, you can make it full screen.
Yeah. So hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, as everyone is joining from the different time zones. So after this insightful panel discussion, it is fairly established that in today's dynamic threat landscape, businesses are facing an array of risks stemming from various factors like geopolitical, socio-economic, environment, technology, and many more. So the business problem I would like to state behind the innovation or our latest product is to navigate these challenges. Security and intelligence experts are essential, providing insights that go beyond the immediate corners so that they can safeguard lives and prevent the temporal and financial losses. Now, to do that, intelligence experts needs a solution that effectively detects the reliable operational risk events relevant to business operations from multiple channels. And that's where we would like to introduce Data Surfer, Midcat's AI-driven critical event monitoring tool to integrate the human expertise to provide the risk intelligence. Now, harnessing the power of AI and NLP, Data Surfer scrapes over 20,000 plus validated open sources to provide you the risk intelligence across the 12 defined non-financial risk categories that you can see on your screen. Now, these events are contextualized and assessed for the business impact by our own team of subject matter experts to provide the actionable intelligence, which is completely curated. Now, I'll take you to the actual web application as Data Surfer offers four key functions. First is the critical event monitoring, where you get the near real-time actionable insights in the form of alerts. Second one is a data analytics, which can be performed on those 12 risk categories for any particular region. Third one is the risk reports and advisories created by our subject matter experts. And fourth one is a contact analyst where you can have access to 24 by 7 to our esteemed subject matter experts in case of any emergency or ad hoc request. Going to the critical event monitoring, it offers live monitoring, forecast monitoring, and historical data. In live monitoring, there are different views created for the monitoring purpose, for command center, for a personal monitoring, etc. So basically, it gives you the two so that you can stay abreast of the current and upcoming situations. Going to the map view, here you can have access to all the risk alerts relevant to your geography in a single screen. On left hand side, there is a filter panel, and on the right hand side, you can see the list of alerts along with all the alerts populated on the screen. So to make the monitoring easy, we have created three different screens as you can see on your top left. The geographical monitoring or geographical alert screen gives you the access to all the risk events from your subscribed geography or the geography of your interest. Second one is a proximity monitoring screen. This automatically funnels down the events which are relevant to your or happening near to your business locations, which are mapped on here using the lat longs. And third one is a watch list monitoring screen. This is a completely customizable screen made to monitor those events which are active or live in nature, like the Israel-Hamas war or any event or a natural hazard event which is taking place continuously. So you can track all the situational developments related to that particular event. From the event, we have two different types of alert: informative and intelligence alert. Informative alerts make sure that you get the near real time intimation as soon as it is reported in some authenticated open source media. It will be available for you as a near real time heads up so that you can start preparing action from your end. And the call to action button has been given as an request analysis. Second one is intelligence alert. Those events which are highly critical and are likely to have much larger impacts are identified by a team of analysts, and they create a contextualization for that particular event. So you can see, apart from the top level information, you can also see the description, the background, the current updates, the impact on business, and all the sources which have been used to create that alert are also listed so that you can have a complete transparency. On the map, there will be all the event locations where it is taking place. And then on the same card, you can also see the affected entity. The impact radius is editable. If you want to see that if the impact radius changes, what other locations are likely to get impacted, one can actually change the impact radius and the affected entities will appear here. After going through this detailed alert card, you can download it into the PDF format for easy circulation. And if you still have any particular question, you can directly reach out to our team of analysts and put down your question regarding this event. And if you feel that this particular event is critical in nature, and if you would like to keep the continuous tab on the developments, then you can add that event to the watch list screen. And then this will trigger an intimation to our internal team, and they will start providing you all the situational developments. So this is how through all the filters and different screens, map view can be used to get the required intelligence that you require for making the informed decisions. Now, if this is too much of information and you want to customize the events which are populating, we have the second view, that is the list view of monitoring, where you can create your actual filter for yourself. So for example, you can make the different filter for different regions. So like for Abu Dhabi, you would like to have based on the different impact levels. If you have office and you would like to have all the offices, all the locations, then you have the Abu Dhabi for all the impact levels. For India, if you don't have much business, then you can select only for crucial. Like this, you can do and filter for different regions and populate the alerts based on your requirements. So once it is populated, there is no clutter, no excess information, and you can access the information that only you require. It also gives the facility to create a subscription. So it will be a one-time activity to create this personalized view or personalized filters, and you can subscribe it for the WhatsApp alert and the email notification. So you don't have to log in every time for this particular intelligence. Third, to make it more easy, we also have the event snapshot, especially for the travel purpose. If you would like to have a quick glance about what has gone through in that particular country, city, or that location of your office, you can always select a particular city and the duration. And then with one click, you can always see that what events have been taking place under that particular time duration. So this is how you can use the event snapshot. Now this is for the live monitoring. Next section is for the upcoming monitoring, where you can have a direct access to all the planned events from a particular geography. And then you can also have the planned events for the next 90 days. All you have to do is select a duration and the country for which you would like to see the planned events, and it will be populated as on your screen. It will also be there in the statistical format. If you would like to see that any particular category which events are taking place, all the events can be visible to you, and you can download it into the Excel format. Similarly, you will also have access to the historical data. If you would like to carry out the trend analysis or the risk assessment for a particular geography, all the events from 2019 will be visible to you for your deep understanding or the comprehensive risk assessment. The second section is the data analytics. Without any human intervention, if you would like to see and carry out the data analytics, you will have access to this particular section, where all you have to do is select a particular region and time duration, and it will populate the entire data analytics. So for example, I have taken Israel for past 6 months. You can see almost all events are related to external threats, followed by civil unrest and political. You can see and get the access to the events which are taking place, and then you can download it into an Excel format. We also provide the sub risk categories like external intervention, border conflicts, protest. Each risk category has multiple sub risk categories, and then you also have the risk level and impact level distribution. So you can see the timeline that which events are taking place at what duration, and then it also has a top level heat map where the event to show where the event are actually taking place or what is the vulnerable area. Now, to moving on to the next section, we have the risk reports and advisories. It gives you the complete repository of the products created by our team of analysts in the form of special reports and advisories. We do give the periodic updates like monthly, weekly, and daily updates, and then we provide advisories and special reports based on all the risk events taking place in the overall world. All the risk reports can be downloaded into a PDF format and then can be circulated within your team. And in case that if you want to make the ad hoc report or any personalized travel advisory, there is a fourth section that is a contact our analyst, where you can actually put down your query stating that what is your exact requirement and which kind of report you need. As soon as you put down your query, your assigned SPOC will get in touch with you to understand the depth in which you require that report and the duration which will be required to create that report. Once it is delivered, you can utilize or see that report and download it using the action button. So these are the four key functions for the offered by data surfer, which can be used to minimize the temporal and financial losses and also safeguard the lives. So that's all from my end. Back to you, Mithun. And I would like to request everyone to opt for the demo, and link has been given in the chat section.
Thank you for the demo, Abhijit. If you have any queries related to Data Surfer or would like to schedule a detailed demo where you can, pose your specific questions and, get in touch with us, we would be very happy to hear from you via our LinkedIn page or Twitter social media handles. And also, you can also refer to the contact details of Mr. Kunal, which is provided in the chat box. All right. So moving on to our second panel discussion on Emea Risk Review 2024, which is moderated by Ms. Shraddha Bhandari. An alumnus of Lady Shri Ram College and LSE, Ms. Shraddha Bhandari is also the founder of Dubai-based Confluence Consultants. Ms. Bhandari is an international expert in geostrategic intelligence, operations, and socio-political risks. Earlier, Ms. Bhandari has also served as the APAC head of geopolitical and security intelligence at Barclays, and also worked across startups, government, and world-class universities. Ms. Shraddha has also delivered lectures at Harvard University, OSAC summits, and also contributed to reputed journals on global affairs. It's a pleasure to have Ms. Shraddha, and over to you for the panel.
Thank you very, very much. And a very, very warm welcome to all my panelists. Can I have all of you please switching on your videos so that everybody can see you? Just give me 1 second. Okay. So yeah, I love being on the other side of the table. Today, I get to grill my panelists. Generally, it's me answering all sorts of difficult questions. So yeah, this is very good today. So a lot of you have inquired about how we're doing in terms of the rains, and it's been alluded to the rains in the UAE. And it's thank you everyone for checking on us. But I never thought that I will be stranded in my home in Dubai because of rains. Yeah, Bombay, yes. Singapore, yes. London, yes. Maybe sandstorms, yes. But rains, not really. And I guess it really goes on to show that the region is changing in fundamental ways. And it neatly ties into what we are discussing today, right? So let's get on with it then. One word to describe the Middle East region, actually more than one word, for me would be change and contradictions. I was at the Abu Dhabi Finance Week last year, which is one of the biggest finance events in the region, where Ray Dalio, the legendary hedge fund manager, and the team of Brevin Howard, another very big European hedge fund, highlighted their plans of not only expanding, but increasing their strategic stakes in the Gulf countries. These are guys who know where the next growth spurts are coming from. There have also been talks from the top sort of rating agencies about how the next 50 years of growth are going to come from the certain select countries of the African continent that are emerging as tech hubs that have a very young population and that are very important to energy transitions. On the other hand, this was a statement that JP Morgan Chase's CEO, Jamie Dimon, made last week, that the biggest global risk to governance and economies is the ability of the free world to unite and survive. Obviously referring to Russia's war in Ukraine, but also to the conflicts in the Middle East, in Sudan, the coups in Africa. So this is the contradiction: intractable conflicts that get the region to a brink of war, yet cutting-edge developments, technological, economic, and political, that are getting it to a brink of progress. Which way it will tip, there's no one better than this panel to simplify the landscape for you. In this region, as I've said before, that we look at everything from an opportunities lens. Yes, there are risks, but opportunities also abound. So let's get to our speakers who are risk professionals, geopolitical experts, and business leaders. So let's start first with the women in the house. Dr. Victoria, can you give me a hoot right here? Is Dr. Victoria here? Oh, I think she's connecting to audio. Never mind, I will just introduce her in the meantime. Dr. Victoria Ogbuhi, her range of expertise is so diverse, security operations, intelligence, crisis management, incident response, leadership of cross-functional teams. And she has very valuable experience of field work in Africa, I think, which is going to be a great addition to this panel. She's won a number of awards. I'm just going to highlight two here. Outstanding Security Performance Awards in all 3 individual categories and the Security Manager of the Year. Besides all of this, he still finds time to do a lot of voluntary work and is a prominent volunteer leader. I'm already fangirling Dr. Victoria. Moving on to Dr. Suha Subukoglu. I hope I pronounced the name right.
Yes, thank you, Shraddha.
I have. Okay, great. So if I've done it wrongly, you have the liberty to completely manipulate my name. I have no issues. His credentials are immaculate. He's a senior researcher at Trends Research and Advisory in Abu Dhabi, one of the most premium think tanks in the region, as well as an advisory board member in energy geopolitics and maritime security at Koç University's Maritime Forum in Istanbul. His academic career has spanned practically all the universities that I always wanted to go to. So Johns Hopkins, Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, and University of Edinburgh. If you go to his LinkedIn profile, you're going to see him featured in a lot of journals, a lot of TV channels. He's a published author. I'm a celebrity. I'm sorry, he's a celebrity, and I'm very happy to know this celebrity. But when you read his articles and engage with him, what comes out, his clarity on geopolitics and geoeconomic is impressive. Moving on to my mentor and one of the most inspiring leaders in the region, Mr. Sunil Sinha. I know he'll get very embarrassed, but this is all true. No one knows the regional business landscape better than Mr. Sinha, having served as the head of India's Tata Sons in the region for years, and then as a board member of Tata International West Asia. As a founder and CEO of Ignite Excellence Advisory, he is the person to reach out for any business setup, regional expansion, and ESG advice. He's also on the board of several companies and industry organizations. And you know what is best about him? He is extremely approachable, handholds everyone who's coming into the region. So any startups here, any companies here, please do reach out to him for guidance. Last but not the least, Ian Findlay. He's a maverick. He doesn't say or write too much about himself, considering the short profile I got from him, but believes in action. The looks are also such. He's a veteran of the South African Army, of the British Army. He served in almost all troubled hotspots during his military career and in his corporate life. He's one of the few expats who was an India security leader for an MNC, and he's actually lived in India for a long time. We'll do the analysis interaction in the panel, Ian, but I am more interested in the spider in the Senegal story. And I hope we'll be able to touch on that at some point of time. So welcome all of you. Dr. Victoria, we missed you. Hi from Nigeria.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Super. So should we get rolling? Okay, let's go for it. So I will start with you, Ian, if I may. The Middle East remains on a potential tenterhook, right? So you've got the Israel-Gaza war, you have the Iran factor in Yemen, Lebanon, Iraq, and Syria. You've got proxy groups like Hezbollah, Houthis, militias in conflict zones. You've got the superpowers playing their own games. Then you've got new tactics emerging like the Houthis in the Red Sea and Bab al-Mandeb. How do you see these jigsaw pieces coming together in the short to the midterm? How will the conflict evolve, and what are some of the impacts on travel risks and business continuity? Hi, Ian, are you here? You with us? I think he's frozen. Hi, Ian, are you here with us? Okay, never mind.
His
We will.
picture is frozen. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's frozen. Well, perils of technology. Never mind. We will move on to the second question. I was hoping the first one flows into the second one, but that's okay. Dr. Suha, this question is for you. Your area of interest is geoeconomics, and Middle East and North Africa particularly has been at the center of geoeconomics in a lot of ways. Right, so you've got the BRICS expansion, which was alluded to in an earlier panel as well, which has, I think, 5 countries from the region. So Saudi, Iran, Ethiopia, UAE. And so that's one aspect of it. Then there is the whole narrative of the petro yuan, which is essentially the biggest challenge to the dollar. And then you've got mid powers or swing states or whatever you want to call them, getting together to form bilateral currency swaps, getting into trade agreements, fundamentally challenging the way the Western concept of governance and financial systems have been contrived. So how do you see geoeconomic trends evolving in this region? And what are some of the impacts of that and of the conflicts in the region?
Sure. Thank you, Shraddha, and hello, everyone. And nice to meet all of you and to all your participants and guests listening to us. Greetings to all of you from Abu Dhabi. I think, Shraddha, on the positive side, MENA economic growth, MENA, Middle East, North Africa economic growth is, I think, expected to recover this year as higher domestic demand provides support for renewed growth. But when you look at geopolitical developments affecting growth, are the impacts of the conflict, for instance, in Ukraine, Israel, Gaza, as you also mentioned, Red Sea, especially on tourism and trade, not to mention oil production cuts by OPEC. Non-oil growth remains strong, and this year is expected to bring, unlike the last, is expected to bring account surpluses, oil exporting nations. Speaking of the UAE, for instance, the impact of Ukraine war or Gaza war and the rising geopolitical tensions are actually felt less here than other countries in other parts of the region. I mean, the economy, yes, it was forecast to growth by a healthy 5.7%, but it's been revised down due to the oil production cuts down to 4.2%, and also due to slower than expected non-oil growth. But there is optimism in place, and that's partly based on expectations of, as I mentioned, sustained demand, expansion in production, and the possibility of new projects and increased investment. And the risks, as mentioned, are an escalation in conflicts such as an all-out war between Israel and Iran and potential spillovers to other countries. Impact on oil prices if choke points are throttled, and increase in commodity prices, not just oil, but other commodities as well. If shipping disruptions are prolonged in the region and trade routes affected, as well as political uncertainty and social unrest that might affect general economic sentiment in the region. But going to the geopolitical aspects of it, I think GCC countries we see are still resisting this kind of US tendency to push them towards this "are you with us or against us" type of question, being forced to pick a side in this rivalry or this divergence between the warring parties, on one hand Russia and Ukraine, and on the other Iran and Israel. So again, the prolonged conflicts have the potential to slow down growth and impact tourism revenues. But overall, I think if you look at also persistent global inflation, that will have an effect on the region as well in terms of cost of living and credit crunch. If you, for instance, look at oil prices, they are hovering around $85 to $90 a barrel. We might possibly put in sight $100 per barrel by the summer or even earlier if tensions continue to rise. So there's always this upside risk. But coming to your question, and I will wrap up due to time, on the multilateral engagements or minilaterals, I think if, for instance, there is a tendency to trade oil with China in yuan rather than US dollars, it will add momentum to the current petro-yuan trading between China and Russia. For instance, Saudi Arabia's SWIFT messaging volume, if you say, for instance, in yuan, is not even 1% of Russia's, but the potential is there. It's clear. So, UAE, Saudi Arabia, India, and China intend to settle cross-border transactions with their respective native currencies. And that's, I think, where discussions around common currency or trading in local currencies come within the under the umbrella of BRICS Plus, where National Development Bank, for instance, the BRICS Bank, also called, can help increase interoperability, economic integration, and mechanisms for digital payments. I think I will stop at that and maybe address some other questions from you or from the audience when we come to the next round.
Sounds perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Sunil Sinha, coming to you. As I said, here we wear, and you taught me this, that we wear an opportunity lens always, right? Every risk is a way to do work, to make things change, to bring in technological developments. And really, there's been a lot of good news. I think Ian was supposed to deliver the bad news, but till he comes in, we'll continue with the good news. There have been some of the fastest growing economies in the region have been from the region. There's a lot of coordination happening between mid-powers on, for example, climate transition, energy. There are sovereign wealth funds. There are startups coming. The Americans are just investing big time in the G42, the artificial intelligence company, for example. So how do you see the economic sectors evolving? What for you would be the top 3 sectors in the region? And what are the opportunities and challenges?
Shraddha, first of all, thank you very much for having me on this panel. And hello, everyone. I'm happy to share my thoughts. With your permission, Shraddha, I would like to expand the scope of this discussion for some time, from Middle East to MENA, because we need to look at the entire territory. And what I see is that MENA region is often painted by the same brush. But I think it's important to recognize that it consists of 3 distinct regions with different economies, different demographics, and different development trajectories. So let's look at what are these 3 regions. In my view, I think first we have the affluent and aspiring MENA, countries like UAE, Saudi Arabia, and other GCC partners, where the average per capita income is close to $30,000 US. And these nations, what are the characteristics of these nations? These nations are actively diversifying their economies, and businesses, people like you and I, can tap into sectors like technology, logistics, tourism, which are absolutely booming here. Then we have emerging MENA, second. And these are the countries like Morocco, Turkey, Egypt, and others, where average per capita income is around $6,500. And these countries have their own unique strength. And they are taking initiatives to boost their economy, but their initiative is not all pervasive like GCC countries, diversification. And businesses can seize opportunities in sectors where these countries are excelling. So there are opportunities, but limited opportunities. And lastly, we have countries facing turmoil like Syria, Yemen, Iran, Iraq, Lebanon. I don't know where do I put Israel right now. But unfortunately, these nations are experiencing, I would say, heightened civil unrest, and business have limited scope over there. So on behalf of Ian, I will also add some bad news, then I'll add the good news.
Perfect.
So let's look at what has plagued this region. what was the background plagued this region? I think the first was in oil exporting countries, economies were heavily dependent on oil. And so money making was very easy. There was a widespread political tension and probably civil unrest. There are also cases where countries are under sanction, like Iran and others. I would hesitate, but I have to say that in some of the countries, opacity and corruption in government have also created a big deal of problem, and countries are trying to get over this. Traditionally, culture used to be very conservative, rigid, and in many cases condoned inequality. Having said that, I think the wheels of transformation are now turning very fast. And I think we are all sitting here in the panel, outside the panel, we are fortunate to be witnessing this rapid, widespread transformation. And I'm going to talk about this transformation and opportunities a little bit. So now let's look at what are the opportunities. And when I talk about opportunities, I'll limit myself to Middle East because the real opportunities exist here. The first thing is that we have the exciting world of economic diversification. The Middle East is actively moving away from heavy reliance on oil, venturing into sectors like technology, infrastructure, like tourism, like retail, like manufacturing, trade, logistics. So there is a whole host of sectors which are opening up for businesses to come and explore their opportunities here. And therefore, the businesses that jump on this diversification train can ride their growth, can ride the wave of growth. I think secondly, which is equally important to my mind, there is cultural revolution which is taking place in this region, which is happening in this region. And you know what is unique is that the traditional and modern ideas are colliding here, creating a vibrant landscape for businesses to innovate. So there is huge, widespread opportunity here. It's like a perfect mix of old and new, giving companies chance to offer products for old and new. And therefore, my message is embrace the cultural blend and let your business thrive. This embracing the cultural blend is also very important. And lastly, the opportunity exists because there are structural reforms driving positive change. If you see, Middle Eastern economies are making significant efforts to create more transparent business environment. Governments are implementing reforms to kind of enhance the ease of doing business, and which is taking place across the region. Somewhere it is faster, somewhere it is slower. So finally, we can look at the trends. So let's look at what are the big trends that are shaping business landscape in Middle East. So as I said, number one, economic diversification is a big trend which is happening. We need to ride that. There is strong focus on reducing dependence on oil. I think second very important thing is that there is a shift in demographics in the region, which is really fascinating. You know, there is a study which shows that Middle East population is projected to be double by 2100. providing businesses with huge opportunities to cater to the evolving needs of growing population. So it's like never-ending customer party, which is going to happen. And let's not forget about the technological advancements. Middle East boasts to be one of the highest internet mobile penetration region, highest 5G implementation globally. So, if you put these things together, I think there are huge opportunity. If you take up retail, there is huge opportunity. One more thing that I would like to add, and we should not miss, is that there is huge opportunity because there is rise of sovereign wealth funds, and GCC countries put together. I think the sovereign wealth fund is over 2.7, 2.8 trillion dollars, which is huge, and this wealth is looking for opportunities. Looking for credible partners, credible opportunities. So I think I'm very excited by the opportunities that this region presents. And with that excitement, I get up every day and I work every day.
Super.
I think I'll leave it here.
That was a beautiful summation. Economic diversification, cultural revolution, and structural reforms. I think it sums up how the region is evolving and really sets the tone for everybody who's looking to either enter the market, take advantage of the opportunities. I'm sure a lot of people in the panel are. Dr. Victoria, it's time to grill you now. You're the only woman in the panel and you're based in Africa. So I'm going to ask you a harder question. I mean, I hate generalizing the entire African continent. It's very, very different. One part of Africa is very different from each other. But I was talking to somebody who's in the UN peacekeeping mission in New York. And at the cost of sounding crude, he made two distinctions for Africa. He told me that it's the last virgin continent in the world, meaning the opportunities are tremendous. But he also went on to say that it's also a very unsettled part of the world, which means that the peace or the conflict facade is very transitionary. So in Ethiopia, 2 years ago, the president, or 3 years ago, the president got a Nobel Prize. Conflicts are back. Rwanda has sorted its issues, but it still remains a heavily armed state, for example. So there are a lot of opportunities, but there are a lot of risks. So from your perspective, I'm going to start from the risks. What, according to you, whether it's a conflict in Sudan, whether it's the coups, whether it's governance issues, how are you seeing the risks emerging in the African, again, I hate to generalize it, but the African continent?
All right, thank you so much. Please confirm you all can hear me. My network is fluctuating, I don't know why.
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, so in terms of what is happening in Africa, I don't see any emerging risks for now, because all of the risks that have been predicted before now are here with us. They are happening now, and we are seeing them being plausible. In some cases, if it's within a small unit, you call them operational risks, for example. Okay, now going back to the kind of conflict situation we are having in Africa, we see the issue with Sudan, which started exactly 1 year ago. I think it was 15th April 2023. Sudan has been a crisis-prone country for such a long time. And the domain where it's occupying within the Sahel is also a very strategic location for Africa. And I'm going to let you know why as this response progresses. But we see that after the coup in Sudan in 2021, there was an attempt again to thwart the transition government in place. Okay, and that was what led somehow to the civil war that was ignited last year between the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces. Now, there is war in Sudan, and this war is pressurizing other countries within that region. Okay, now if you look at what is happening in Sudan, you are beginning to see that there's an escalation in hunger, there's an escalation in lack, there's an escalation in ill health, there is an escalation in even the number of deaths we've recorded within this part of Sahel. Because you cannot expect anything progressive in a crisis-prone situation. And that is why the most recently released Global Terrorism Index for 2023, just released in 2024, you will notice that Africa has now become the epicenter for terrorism. It used to be Middle East. It has now moved to Africa. And in Africa, 43% of all terrorism impact globally in 2023 happened within the Central Sahel region of Africa. You can imagine how enormous it is. And the report also says that 90 to 98% of all the terrorist attacks and deaths also happened in countries where there are conflicts. Okay, now you can see the correlation between conflicts and terrorism. Now, terrorism cannot flourish in a peaceful environment. I think that is what African leaders have to begin to take cognizance of or take note of. Okay, for terrorism to hibernate, a place has to be a crisis prone, because in a crisis situation, governments are trying to protect their territorial integrity, to protect the lives and properties of their people, and less attention is being paid to what other things are happening around those objectives, okay? And so that is how you see conflicts begin to grow. Now, for the countries that surround Sudan right now, we are beginning to see pressure in terms of the number of internally displaced persons that are moving even out of Sudan to all of these countries. Don't forget that these countries have their own economic and social pressures that they are also grappling with. And this kind of conflict is not what we want to see in Africa at this time, okay? So if you look at Egypt, Egypt has received quite a number of refugees from Sudan. Right now, Egypt is dealing with Ethiopia in terms of resources within the Nile River, okay? So Egypt is also grappling with its own internal issues. Ethiopia, on the other hand, has received lots of refugees coming in from Sudan, and Ethiopia is dealing with the Tigray people at the other side, okay? Now, Chad presently is grappling with over 400,000 internally displaced people. Okay, now in a whole, record has it that 15,000 people, including men and women, have died since this war started in Sudan from 2023 to now. And over 8-point-something million people have been displaced. Okay, so we have continuous risk of displacement, continuous risk of increased crisis in Africa, continuous risk of terrorism, continuous risk of coup in African countries. Okay, available records now shows that across the globe, African continent has the highest number of coups from 1950 to now in 45 out of 54 African countries. You can imagine how Africans have the appetite to execute coup or for military intervention. Of these 214 attempts, 106 has been successful. So it is massive. We saw when the incident with ECOWAS happened last year, when ECOWAS community tried to sanction some of those juntas, and they broke out of the ECOWAS bloc and created Alliance of the Sahel states, okay? Eventually, ECOWAS had to succumb. And so the signal that this is sending to, and which I consider one of the biggest risks we are grappling with now, the message that it's sending out to the public is that any intending coup plotter can go ahead and execute his or her plan because he understands that this will not be met with any consequence. Okay? Okay,
Perfect.
you get that?
Perfect.
All
Yes.
right. So it's a major one. I don't know the time that I've been allotted to respond to this, but we are going to be looking at opportunities in terms of good governance strategies, leadership.
We'll come back for opportunities. We have supplementary questions for you.
All right, thank you.
Let's do that. So last call for Ian. Is he here? Not here? Okay, I don't think he's here. Okay, so all three of you now have to carry the burden of answering my questions. Dr. Suha, can I start with you, please? So I wanted to know a little bit more about, some of the initiatives, the BRICS expansion, for example, India, UAE currency swap. There are a lot of things happening in terms of bilateral deals. How much do you think is glitter, and how much is glitter and gold, and how much is actually happening from your perspective? And my second question would be your role about Turkey's role in the region. I mean, you could take one and then take on the other.
Yeah, so the expansion of BRICS with the inclusion of 5 new members marks a significant milestone, I think, in the organization's evolution. It not only solidifies economic strength, comprising of substantial share of global GDP and critical resources, but it also reinforces the members of the group's commitment to fostering a multipolar world order. It aligns with the growing discontent, I would say, with the existing international order, and maybe presents an alternative platform for emerging nations to address pressing issues such as trade imbalances, income inequality, and currency dominance. I mean, there is a lot of talk, hype around it. Let's say that it's more of a talk shop rather than anything substantial. There is some truth to it, but also not, because yes, there are challenges that accompany the opportunities presented by the BRICS expansion, which is now called the BRICS Plus, such as the lack of formal structures, institutional capacity, and lack of a shared agenda within a group, that has divergent priorities, geopolitical interests that hinder its effectiveness in addressing complex issues such as Israel-Palestine, or Israel-Iran, or Ukraine-Russia, and so on. So let's say the call for having a secretariat and a more coordinated approach to policymaking, I think, highlights the need for stronger organizational framework. Just to touch on the discussion on common currency issue, I think the formation of a BRICS currency for the 10 strongly diverging and geographically dispersed economies is, under present conditions, I think, unfeasible. Yes, for instance, Russia has a strong incentive to support the creation of an alternative reserve currency, and has led the BRICS efforts to do so. But for the new development bank to have a common exchange rate policy, a joint financial infrastructure, is still a long way to go, not to mention the large, amount of foreign reserve that it would have to hold. Let's also touch upon the fact that, the member countries have different sovereign credit ratings among, the international credit rating agencies. That would also be a concern for a reserve currency. So I think it's still some way down the road, but what would be better to focus on at this point is to increase bilateral trade or multilateral trade in local currencies, and increase the NDB's foreign exchange reserves as much as possible, rather than forming a common currency. So the priority should be to address large trade deficits between countries with different economic profiles, and focus on foreign direct investment, technology transfer, and sale of value-added products, rather than commodity trade or extractive sectors. And just a final word on Turkey, which is also in a precarious situation given the different push and pull relationships in the region and the tensions rising. With the latest, I think, local election results, it's going into an interesting period, and I think a more healthy period, where the power is not necessarily concentrated in one hand or one party or group, but dispersed across local municipalities as well as the government. That kind of forms a good balance between the political focal points in the country. I don't think its foreign policy is going to change drastically, and it's been going through this bridge building and normalization efforts within the wider Middle East, with the various countries except for Israel, which is a pity, which is unfortunate that, since the war broke out, kind of found itself in a difficult position, Turkey, that it had to, for the first time, impose, export restrictions on its trade with Israel. But that's a fact of life, and I think we're going to see more of that coming. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
So, Shraddha, I think I would like to support Suha's point that, the bilateral approach is something which will drive investments and business. Multilateral are also a good platform, but they are not as nimble as bilateral. For example, the bilateral comprehensive economic partnership agreement, CEPA agreement between India and UAE is driving huge amount of investment, bilateral investment between the two countries. So 5-6 years back, the trade between the two countries was stagnating at $50 billion. It has jumped up to 85 billion. The ambition was to make it 100 billion by 2027. I think it will cross 100 billion within next couple of years. So, and this kind of bilateral arrangements, agreements are happening between other countries also. And I think that's the way to go for enhancing trade and agreement. Thank you, Suha, for such a lovely point.
Thank you. Most welcome, sir.
Super. So we'll have to address the elephant in the room since Ian is not here. What do we see the future of the Israel-Palestine conflict, Mr. Sinha, if you could take it? How much does it worry you in terms of businesses? So you're based here and you deal with the region. I'm not asking for like semantics, but how much do you worry about an escalation between Israel and Iran? How much do you worry about the proxy groups, the kind of superpower rivalries that are emerging? How much do they do they give you sleepless nights, for example?
So, Shraddha, I don't have the crystal ball, and therefore, I won't be able to predict. But I'm an optimist, and I see from positive angle things what are happening. As I don't see the conflict, expanding into a major region-wise conflict, because there are forces which are trying to contain this conflict. For example, take Iran and Israel conflict. Now, one of the view is that the Iranian response has come because of the Israeli attack on the Iranian consulate in Syria. But if you look at this Iranian response very carefully, it looks like it was orchestrated, and everyone knew it is going to happen at this and this time. Everyone knew what caliber gun will be fired, what kind of rocket will be fired, how they will be countered. So it has been done. US, which plays a very important role in Middle East and in escalating or containing the conflict, I think Biden will be much better off by containing the conflict at this point of time for two reasons. He has to go through the election. Oil can't afford oil prices going up. Once the oil prices go up, it will hit the economy very, very badly. And therefore, you would have seen in the last 1 year, there has been informal agreements with Iran for increasing their oil production. And Iran oil production has gone up from 1.4 million barrels per day to almost 2.4 million barrels per day. So there is a tacit support to Iran to come back and join the party. US Biden is also not in favor of, encouraging Netanyahu to push this beyond the red line. Although Netanyahu may like to do that because he has his own domestic problem and more the war prolongs, the better will be his longevity. So, considering all that, I think this will remain, this will simmer, but in my view, it is not going to affect very, very badly. If you see oil prices, when the conflict started, Iran and Israel went up to 90 plus. It has come back to 87 today, and it is likely to settle down at 85. That itself is an indication that the market is not seeing. Yeah.
And sorry for putting you into the spotlight, but there are just two things I'll add to this. We're not going to go into details, but something to think about. The role of the sort of the peacemakers in the region. So UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, I think nobody can afford a regional escalation. As we said, we're all going towards diversification, foreign investments, etc. And something to think about is US elections are just around the corner. So will this change? Anyway, Dr. Victoria, I will come to you. So there are two things that I wanted to just discuss with you. Africa has come into the limelight as being very critical to the energy transition. A number of countries have natural gas, they have critical minerals. They're also emerging as tech valleys, so localized Silicon Valleys in Lagos, for example. How do you see the opportunities panning out from the fact that it's going to soon have the youngest population in the world, a lot of resources, and also the superpower rivalries, which are panning out in greater investments, greater focus. So some of the opportunities in Africa, please. And that's
Right,
you have only about 2 minutes, sorry.
No problems. 1 minute is fine.
Okay.
Somebody already wrote in the chat that he's looking forward to hearing my responses regarding opportunities. In Africa, opportunities abound. Once Sunil was talking, he mentioned diversification in Asia. That is what we should be looking at right now, even in Africa. In Africa, when it comes to, I think, the digital transformation and green economy, is what I think African leaders should be leveraging on to drive job creation, innovation, economic development, and most importantly, inclusion. Okay, but there's a challenge, especially with the digital advancements, and that challenge is around accessibility, affordability, and accessibility, affordability, and inclusive broadband. Okay, so we are still having this kind of challenge in terms of reach within the African continent. And so I think one of the ways Africa would resolve this, there's an opportunity in the different governments at different levels and even at regional levels, coming together individually, collectively, to develop strategic framework for digital advancement on the continent. And so this document should focus, if you ask me, it should be able to focus on skilled, tech-savvy workforce, okay, that must take advantage of the technological advancements, which would help create the dynamic ecosystem that businesses in Africa, business and organizations in Africa can leverage to scale up as well. Africa currently has been projected to grow its population to 2.5 million by 2050. Africa's agribusiness has been estimated to hit $1 trillion by 2030. Now, Africa is also the most resource abundant continent. You mentioned about Africa being the only virgin continent left now, and that is correct. So there's a problem with Africa being, as far as we know, it's a fact, Africa is the most resource abundant continent, which means Africa is the richest continent that is still there. But there's a discrepancy when you look at the resources within Africa and how impoverished and struggling Africans are. So we have opportunities around good leadership, because most of the coup juntas will tell you they took over because the people were complaining. And we saw in most instances when these things happen, people troop to the street to celebrate, okay? They are looking forward to liberation. We see a number of Africans living through the Mediterranean to Europe. So there's a crisis in Africa. Africans are losing their talents. They are losing so many things because of crisis and poor leadership. And so once we begin to look into how we can make the economy green, through agriculture, for instance, we have the population, we have all it takes, okay, to feed even the growing population. So there are a lot of opportunities in terms of creating jobs, in terms of economic diversification, in terms of good leadership, in terms of eschewing corruption at all levels. Every of those things that we do as leaders in Africa that make people restive, those are the things we have to begin to correct now. There are a lot of opportunities there. And so one final thing I want to say is that nobody would build Africa but Africans, okay? And the earlier we understand that on this continent, the better for us. Thank you.
I already see a future leader, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Victoria, you should become a leader in Africa. That was really nice and passionate. So we've been granted some more time, courtesy the organizers. So there are just two things I want to say before I grill again. So I was in Lagos, and they have something called the local Silicon Valley, where they're doing a lot of tech development. And some of the startups that are coming out of Lagos, out of Nairobi, are very exciting. And so you have these tech conferences in the UAE, in Saudi, etc., where they come and present and they pitch, and some very, very interesting problem solving. So I met somebody that's doing agri-tech, somebody's doing water desalination. So yes, that's a lot of hope in Africa. Mr. Sinha, if I could ask you, what according to you are going to be the top 3 economies in the next couple of years? And maybe something quickly on Saudi Arabia, because that remains a sort of, because a lot is known about the UAE. Saudi Arabia is less known. So from your experience, I mean, if you could sum it up in 2 minutes, that would be great. I know it's unfair, but.
Sure, I will start with the second question first, Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is like your opening remark, change with contradiction, you know, and it fits, this fits in very well with Saudi Arabia. This is a land of opportunities. And I'm personally very excited about what's happening in Saudi Arabia, because they are changing full steam. They are charging full steam ahead with their Vision 2030. We all know about it. And the vision is about creating vibrant society, thriving economy, and very, very ambitious nation. So let me break it down for you where I think the opportunity exists. I think Saudi Arabia is trying to create opportunities in 8 different sectors. I would first talk about mining and metals. You know, Saudi Arabia is hugely investing in mining and metals, and because of which their mega projects, some of the capital from mega projects are being gravitated towards mining and mineral. The belief, Saudi Arabia, and the study says that they have under the ground almost $2.5 trillion worth minerals, which is probably more than what sub-Saharan Africa has. So they're going to invest on that petrochemical manufacturing, I think retail, tourism, hospitality, entertainment, healthcare. So it's a quite diverse range in which they are going to invest. But I would like to talk a little bit about Saudi Arabian mega projects, which are called giga projects, and they are like superheroes of Saudi Arabian business world. The first, of course, everyone knows about NEOM, mind-boggling mega city, of $500 billion of investment into infrastructure, tourism, technology, etc., etc. It is like stepping into the future. So huge. Then we have Qiddiya, an entertainment destination that's very close to Riyadh, and it's going to be the hub for hospitality, retail, and of course, top-notch infrastructure. Then we have Red Sea, Saudi Arabians' most popular luxury resort, which is going to become, and all these are boasting about huge development in trade and tourism. So I think they are putting their attention on infrastructure, technology, digital advancement, and it is like, building a nation, and by creating the physical infrastructure and digital infrastructure. So on Saudi Arabia, one line that I would like to say is the time to buckle up and get ready for thrilling ride into future of Saudi Arabia. You asked me about which economies do you see
in 30 seconds. In 30 seconds,
in
but
30 seconds. Of course, Saudi Arabia will remain, UAE will remain in this region. As of now, Qatar is coming up very well. So in the GCC countries, these are the three regions where I see businesses gravitating their attention, capital, leadership bandwidth to this region. If you look at North Africa, I think Morocco is one country which is very stable, growing at 4%. Everything is stable, going to do very well. This year, right now, Kenya is doing very well. It's slated to grow at 5%. And Kenyan currency is becoming stronger. And so, that also provides great opportunity to invest and do business in future. Thank you very much. I think I've taken more than 2 minutes.
No, and it's very exciting about the mining in metals, because we've been doing a lot of work on critical minerals, and the buck stops at this region and the African region. Massively, the superpower rivalries are playing in such a way that other supply chains are getting disrupted. So it's very exciting. Suha, just for you, in 30 seconds, the top 3 risks for businesses in the region that you operate in. Just 30 seconds.
Who is going first?
That's a difficult question as well. But I think, just to wrap up, so I think we witnessed the birth pains of a new world order, Shraddha, which is more chaotic and less predictable, and we all need to get used to that. I think the erosion of this perceived notion of this, post-World War II liberal world order and the system of values it represents, is kind of eroding, and it's increasingly pushing regional powers to seek alternative avenues and punch above their weight and challenge the world economic and governance model in fundamental ways. But, with the multipolarity underway, I think top 3 risks would be: 1, geopolitical risks, heightening of, armed conflicts, tensions, humanitarian disasters that would ensue, and also trade blockages or restrictions that countries would start to impose. That would also lead to an even more fragmented world order. I think that's all I can say to wrap it up.
Thank you so much, panelists. I know these were difficult questions. They don't have any definitive answers. A lot of them are in the controversial realm at the moment, but you handled all of them with the poise, the dignity, which I expected all of you would. So thank you so very much. Any last one comment in like exactly 20 seconds anybody wants to make to wrap up? A quote, a sound bite, anything? Dr. Victoria, do you want to go?
So
I just want to plead with African leaders to keep an eye on Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab is currently the fastest growing terrorist group in the world, even though it's ranked 4 by Global Terrorism Index. But we have to keep an eye on Al-Shabaab if we want to have peace on the continent. Thank you.
Please keep an eye on Al-Shabaab.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes.
For me, it's let's keep an open mind, embrace the changes, and ride the camel of opportunity to success.
Super. Victoria, there's a question for you in Nigeria. Maybe you can answer it in the chat box itself. I'm not sure how much time we have. Yeah, you can just answer it in the chat box, please. Mithun, over to you. I hope I haven't exceeded.
Yes, can you ask the question? I don't know where the question is.
Dr. Victoria, you can actually address the question if you want. We have a bit of time. We have like 3 to 4 minutes.
Okay, so the question is, please throw some light on Nigeria. That's it.
Just throwing some light on Nigeria.
Yes.
Okay. So the good thing about Nigeria is that Nigeria happened to be one of the most populous country, Black nation in the world. Okay, Nigeria is known as the giant of Africa. You cannot talk about Africa without putting Nigeria in the equation. You cannot be coming from any other continent and you say you don't know Nigeria. So many other different people in the past have referred to Nigeria as a continent of its own. So it's a country with over 1,800 different languages, multiple tribes, sometimes divided along religious and tribal line. Nigeria is also grappling with the infamous Boko Haram, but we are known by lots of great things. Okay, so Nigeria is great in terms of agriculture, in terms of advanced technology compared to other countries within the African continent, and we have a population of over 200 million.
That was amazing. So well summed up. For any of you who want to know more about, the opportunities in tech, there's a lot happening in artificial intelligence, in futuristic tech, blockchain, cryptocurrency, agri-tech. You can reach out to any of the experts here. I know risks is something we need to understand, but opportunities are equally important. And I hope we've driven that point in our panel today. So there's one comment I'd like to read from the chat box, which I think sums it up. If I can only find it, just give me 1 second. Just 1 second. Okay. I think I've lost that comment. Never mind. But thank you so much, panelists. This has been super useful. I hope everybody has now a better idea of how Middle East and Africa is evolving. What are the risks? What are the opportunities? What are the various actors? And please feel free to reach out to any of us if you need any more information. Mithun, over to you. If I've exceeded, it's the speaker's fault. They were so good that I kept asking them questions.
Yeah. And I think we should also say thank you to Shraddha for moderating the panel very, very well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. In fact, we've finished well in time, and thank you so much, Shraddha, for probing those questions. And I think as practitioners and people who study the region, the kind of discussions that we've had today, they were really insightful, and I'm sure that I am going to take back a lot of inferences in my studies about the region. So on that note, thanks to all the speakers, and thanks, Shraddha, for moderation. I guess it's time for us to move on to our next session. Now we move on to our final panel discussion on technology, security, and resilience, moderated by Mr. Sandeep Sinha, Director, Risk Consulting and MSS at Midcat Advisory. Mr. Sandeep is an alumnus of the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies. Mr. Sandeep comes with a wide experience of strategic and tactical planning, operations, and maritime security in high-risk environments in India and abroad. Formerly an Indian Navy submarine commanding officer and now heading the risk consulting and managed services verticals of Midcat, Mr. Sandeep has provided stellar thought leadership and services to a large number of global organizations in India and overseas. Prominent areas of Mr. Sandeep's contributions have been enterprise risk focused on security, threat vulnerability risk assessment, security and safety auditing, emergency and crisis management, process and cost optimization, and technical surveillance and countermeasures. Mr. Sandeep has spoken at reputed industry events as subject matter expert on corporate security, drones and counter drone technology, homeland security, command and control centers for smart cities, etc. Mr. Sandeep, it's a privilege to have you moderating the session, and over to you for the session.
Thank you so much, Mithun. And I am sure you will all share my opinion that it has been a very, very delightful session thus far. There have been some very, very phenomenal takeaways. And I am on my 6th A4 size sheet of jotting down things. Yeah, so now, the best part about having the last panel scheduled for the day is that even if you haven't prepared, you're very, very well prepared because you've gone through a series of discussions and you've heard the views of some very, very respected names. So I too am very, very proud and privileged to be moderating a panel with some very, very respected and very known names. And before I go into introducing my very, very fine panel, I would like to just highlight a few thoughts pertaining to the symposium, its learnings, and how it may perhaps all come together with a focus on technology, security, and resilience. Because finally, actions have to be taken by organizations and companies and teams on the ground. And I shall attempt to direct the conversations during this session so that the takeaways are very, very actionable and specific. So if you see, we have talked about several domains of risk ranging from geopolitical to geoeconomics to pure economics, technology also. We've talked about societal risks. We've talked about, transnational conflicts. We've talked about even some conflicts perhaps being staged. So it is very, very interesting. We have talked about, several factors coming together to create a situation pertaining to risk the way we see it presently. So, I think we can all very comfortably conclude that risk today is multi-dimensional. It is also multi-directional, as very aptly brought out by a few preceding speakers. It is not only very, very dynamic, it is also very widespread. And the intertwinings of various activities happening in different geographies can create the situation that we presently are in. We have also seen that the impacts of various occurrences across the world, I will not say crises, because again, the classification can mean different things to different people. The impacts are not necessarily predictable. We all love talking about, make things predictive. Our approach, our technology, our tools, our platforms should be predictive. But is it really predictive? That is a subject for great debate. The impact is definitely of higher velocity. It is also of higher ferocity. And you can take any, large protest, for example, on any continent. The velocity and the ferocity aspects are very, very marked. Now, the world definitely is in a very, very interesting situation. And the other aspect, apart from security risk or anything related to security risk, is the parallel and concomitant increase in the level, depth, and pace of technology. It is all pervasive and it is very, very ubiquitous. Irrespective of the nature of anyone's business, in some manner, companies and organizations are tech companies sitting on a lot of data. And you see the way new technologies are coming about, they bring great opportunities, but they also bring some degree of risk. Different agencies have brought out different risks related to technology and resilience thereafter. The sequence in which these risks are placed are a little different, but by and large, these technology-related risks are similar. Cybersecurity exposure to cloud assurance thereafter, AI, ML, blockchain. We have data management challenges. We have, especially with so many organizations undertaking a digital transformation. This was also touched upon very briefly in the previous session. Digital infrastructure, data management, data quality, all these things are both risks as well as opportunities. We find that over the last couple of years, the technology sector has gone from the traditional software development models to DevOps and now to DevSecOps. And a lot of opportunity and risks also emanate from here. So with that kind of understanding, I will now introduce my very, very fine panel. First up is Mr. Bruce McIndoe. Very, very respected name of the industry. And if there is anyone who has set the path for use of OSINT to make an organization more resilient, I think it is Bruce. He is not only a recognized leader, author, speaker. He is one of the most prominent names in risk management, geopolitical risk, technology, intelligence. He is also an adjunct professor in a leading university, that is the University of Maryland. He is most known for being the founder of WorldAware, where he created one of the world's leading open source intelligence platform. Not only that, he also is known for his development of third-party risk management maturity models, which have been adopted by global bodies, risk assessment tools. And he has also been adjudged one of the top 25 most influential executives in the business travel industry. He has got a very good experience of the government side as well, where he has been involved with the NSA, CIA, Department of Defense, NASA. Again, he did a lot of work in the open source intelligence field. So, Bruce, thank you very much for being here on behalf of MidCat and my own self. It is a privilege to have you here.
Thank you, and I feel like now it's time to retire with all that.
This is just the beginning, Bruce.
Go out big.
Right. I'm also very, very happy to introduce to the audience my friend Mark Nuttall, who again is a very, very recognized expert in the field of law enforcement, risk management, anti-money laundering, global security, and he's got more than 25 years of very distinguished service in the government agencies as well as the corporate. He has had pivotal roles as a law enforcement officer and as a detective in the New Scotland Yard, Interpol executive officer. And he has also worked with several conglomerates, and he has been the country manager for a leading risk management company in Singapore. And, he made his mark in the business field also, as demonstrated by the growth of that company.
Thank you, Sandeep.
We last met in
I'm
Dubai.
I'm also swimming in Dubai. You can probably see, talking about security and risk and crisis. There we go. My good friend Mohammed here driving the Uber at the moment. I've been about an hour and a half trying to get back to my location across the other side of Dubai, and unfortunately I'm not sat at a nice tidy desk or anything like that. I'm sat in the back of a car, which is good and fantastic. And here we go, crisis in action, guys. There you go.
Well, I would say adaptability and resilience, Mark. Way to go.
I was about to say one of the key themes of this particular session.
You want to try. Here's some adaptability and resilience. These guys driving across the new lake on Sheikh Zayed Road. There you go. If you can see those guys, happy days.
Yes.
Welcome to the flood. Oh, the bus out of the window there. Live in from Dubai.
You stay safe and participate to the extent that you can, Mark.
Certainly shall.
my next guest is Ankit Sabarwal. Hi, Ankit. Ankit is presently the Vice President looking after corporate security, global resilience programs, security audit programs of VFS Global. Now, any one of us who travels overseas have come into contact with Ankit's work. VFS Global, as you know, is the world's largest outsourced services provider for visa and consular services. And they work with, I think, 65 plus governments across 388 cities, if I'm not wrong, as per last count, and across 150 countries. Prior to this, Ankit has also done brilliant work in the cyber and information security, crisis and resilience, and third-party risk management functions of leading companies such as Nokia, Symantec, Mondelez. Ankit has got 18 plus years of work experience, although he doesn't, look that, and he has got a string of qualifications and certifications that make him what he is. Some of the notable ones are CBCP, CISA, CISM, Level 5 Crisis and Risk Management, certified risk implementation professional, and he is also, if I'm not wrong, done something in anti-terrorism, terrorism specialization. So thank you so much, Ankit, for being here. I know you are here in your, personal capacity, and whatever we discuss is going to be in your personal capacity and not necessarily an organizational view, given the nature of VFS, working with so many client governments across so many countries and all. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandeep.
So with that, I would like to start our session with listening to, your appreciation of the situation with focus on the, EMEA region, and about what all we have heard since morning, what all your experiences and all have been. And, one by one, we can go from Bruce to Mark to Ankit. And then somehow we will try and funnel back into technology, security, and resilience so that, the audience can take actionable takeaways from here. So starting with you, Bruce, what is your reading of the situation? Where are we and where do we seem to be headed?
Yeah, it's been very interesting and very early in the morning to listen to the arc of conversation. I wanted to take the context up a little bit higher because this area, technology, security, resilience, permeates not only this region, but the globe. But I would argue that this region is the centroid of driving, rapid change, rapid, adjustments in operational postures. We have 10 conflicts in the Middle East going on. We have 43 in Africa, right? So the things that we're dealing with and responding to are emanating from this region. But I want to take it to the technology, security, resilience, because these are going to go through massive transformation now and into the years to come, driven both by the interdependencies of all three of these, technology, security, resilience, and the externalities that I just talked about. So we have all of that evolving, right? And this is going to transform significantly and impact what we protect and how we do it. So that's going to be kind of my theme. Technology will be the primary catalyst that will be the driver of both demand and change for the work that we do. And you can look at all the technologies that we've talked about, AI and ML, robotics, the 3D and additive manufacturing, bioengineering, quantum computing, globally ubiquitous broadband, and on and on and on. The level and broad and innovation of technology, that speed is just amazing, right? So that is going to create a structural transformation of security, right? That's going to be driven by this technology, both in driving the need for security as well as how we do security, right? And that the outcome of security is not going to be a discipline anymore. It's going to be an objective, right? So the achievement of organizational security as an objective will require a comprehensive, integrated, multidisciplinary protective effort in both the physical and cyber domains. So that's key. And finally, the achievement of organizational resilience will become the ultimate objective of our efforts across these protective disciplines. The achievement, of course, is measured by the organization's ability to anticipate the intelligence, right? Prepare and respond and adapt, much like Mark's doing today, to whether it's incremental or sudden disruptions to their business. So achieving operational resilience will require all the protective disciplines, including physical and cybersecurity, business continuity, emergency and crisis management, health and safety, and on, to come together as a combined force with synchronized joint operations to achieve this in the marketplace. That's my overarching perspective.
Thank you, Bruce. That was brilliant. Mark, in case you can give us your view on your reading of the situation.
I'm currently swimming, and my Uber driver is doing the same thing. That is Sheikh Zayed Road, as you can see at the moment. Anybody that's been to Dubai will understand that this is probably about 4 or 5 miles worth of a swimming pool at the moment. I'll stop my video. Essentially, yes, technology is absolutely fantastic, but when you take the human element out of it and you go to something like this over the past few days in Dubai, which is one of the most technologically enabled countries on this planet, with many, many, many processes of understanding how to implement emergency measures that suddenly disintegrates overnight, with the added factor of nature placed on top. I think we need to really reevaluate where we are kind of going in the world, and how we process our functions of safety and security. Now, I, like Bruce and many others on this call and many others throughout your day, have been involved in urgent active scenarios, military scenarios, law enforcement scenarios, you name it, we've been involved in it. But when it comes down to an entire country becoming defunct, not at the hands of individuals per se, but at the hands of nature, it becomes a little bit of a different question. And I've been in countries such as Papua, Indonesia, Malaysia, all these other ones that have got a similar problem. They've got a problem of flooding, rainfall, etc. But they have the landmass to be able to cope with that in a fashion. The trees and soil, etc., tends to soak it up. Here, we have got a concrete foundation for the majority of the city, which obviously creates no seepage use. And when you're talking about securitization of somewhere like one of the most major cities in the world, there's been a lot of security in terms of people, places, and things. We're in the Middle East, we're in the hot zone, but not of nature itself. And like I say, I've been exposed to things like this, and although you can predict weather patterns, you can't beat them unless you have a historical sense of being able to put in pre-assigned guards against it, which typically take quite a few hundreds of years to do. So I'm from the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom got adequate drainage because it took the country a long time to be able to understand that it's a waterlogged country. And the same for many others. Singapore, I lived in Singapore for a while, same thing. But here, no. And was that due to any foresight or lack of foresight on the government's perspective? I'd say probably not. They expected the country to withstand the usual typical Middle Eastern weather and topography processes, but not a downfall of this instance. And something like this, which is a safety and a security issue, with loads of technology wrapped around it, has arisen within 2 days now, post-event, of the country grinding to a halt. So there are plenty of opportunities to certainly learn from this. And what I would put forward as well, really, is that there are a lot of kind of economic and financial decisions being made at the moment in relation to security professionals and safety professionals. And then those individuals being cut from their roles and cut from their jobs because of the financial crisis, economy, and COVID. And it's those individuals that are needed in these circumstances.
Right. Yes. Very, very interesting that, as technology grows leaps and bounds, and
so that'll be my initial stance, hopefully.
Right. Points well taken, Mark. You're in a different place, and that is a situation that probably no one in Dubai ever expected. I had some inkling because, for the last 2 years, we have been increasingly doing flood risk assessments in the UAE from the data center perspective. And yes, there were indications that someday things are going to be a little watery, if I may say so. So
yeah,
thanks for your.
I'm sat in Dubai, so I can't criticise any of that. So yeah, joking.
Right. Thanks, Mark, once again. Ankit, coming to you now. Mark brought up a very, very important part of resilience. What would your opening remarks of the topic of the symposium and our panel be?
Thank you. And first of all, thank you for inviting me, and privileged to be a part of such an elite panel here. So from my perspective, see, when we look at it from an industry standpoint, and as Bruce very rightly said, Emea is kind of the hotbed, and it's representative of a very large chunk of what we are seeing happening across the globe, right? And I echo a lot of the sentiments, especially from a perspective of how, as practitioners and as stakeholders, we are looking at resilience. So first and foremost, the traditional viewpoints that we used to have from an organization standpoint, whether it was for business continuity or IT disaster recovery or even emergency or crisis management, those lines are getting blurred. They only exist really in a utopian world. And from our perspective, from a practitioner's perspective, there are a lot of areas, and this is also becoming increasingly visible to our stakeholders and to our management, that there are possible seams where some pieces might actually slip through. And so from our perspective, operational resilience is becoming a key element, and the stakeholders is also becoming a lot more demanding. And I think the COVID-19 crisis really added fuel to that fire. We all got used to getting a lot of things sitting at home. We started consuming information a lot faster. A lot of binge watching and availability of the internet kind of added to this entire thing. And a similar expectation now comes in from a perspective of the business. The other element here is, I think there are a lot of evolving, not just terminology, but also evolving risks. The typical terminologies that we used to have for pestle risk analysis, right? Now we have seen ESG come up over the last few years, and very recently, in fact, the 22301 standard on security and resilience actually added an addendum on climate action. Now this is becoming increasingly clearer, and if we also notice the last 3 or 4 World Economic Forum reports, you'll see climate action to be one of the big unsettling points, and organizations are really taking note of that. So it's not just these typical threats that we've been witnessing, the cyber, the insider threat, and so on, but we also have a very large chunk of climate action related pieces which will come up, and they'll disrupt us in very different ways. Mark's currently undergoing something in the in a region which is not typically known for floods. And a similar situation happened in Oman and it happened in Qatar and, just a couple of days back. So it's not just an isolated incident. We are seeing more and more of such incidents, and we need to incorporate that into our organizational resilience framework. The third element that I would like to talk about is that from a practitioner standpoint, I think there's extreme agility required to be able to respond to what we are seeing at this point in time. The pace at which these internal and external threats used to come and hit us used to be perhaps once in a few weeks or a few months. And I will talk a little bit more about it when I expand in the next section. But I think from my perspective, we are now in a real age of polycrisis. And so we have that element of a crisis within a crisis and yet another couple of things happening on the sideline, which is becoming a very new normal or a business as usual for us, right? So the business is evolving, they're evolving their expectations, the stakeholders are evolving their expectations of this entire piece. And so the entire space of resilience will also evolve many leaps and bounds. There'll be a lot of other chunks that will get subsumed into it, like Bruce very rightly said, and I completely echo that sentiment. Your traditional SOCs to your travel security management, to crisis management, to predictive risk intelligence, to information and cybersecurity will all start coming into and rolling into one because organizations don't really see it differently. Those are my initial thoughts, Sandeep.
Thank you, Ankit. Very, very valid points, and I think all your three's overview of the situation have set the context for the further discussion. Bruce, you've been so closely associated with all of the facets that we've just discussed, especially technology. So, I did begin by saying that technology is now all pervasive. And so in your opinion, from the multitude of threats and risks that we've talked about during this symposium, some of which I did mention earlier, the problem is that organizations sometimes, live the fallacy of believing that not all risks and not all threats, especially in technology, are going to be applicable to them. How right or wrong is that notion? And so from the risk and security perspective, what guidance would you give on your appreciation of the top, say, 3 or 4 or 5 biggest risks and also opportunities that technology brings to the fore, in our domain of work?
All right.
What do you want companies to do?
So, so obviously, technology will, permeate all aspects of business and organizations. As I say, AI is the new electricity, right? So in time, that will permeate everything, and that, like we see electricity today, right? From that, cybersecurity threats sit on number 1. That's the top technology risk that I see for organizations. And the technology that we're producing, especially AI, enables even trivial players to become very powerful and very capable. So the expanse of threat vectors and opportunities are just going to grow unbounded, right? So that is as a key one. And so if companies are not geared up and focusing on this and having real capabilities, not only for avoiding the breach, but quickly containing it. So you've got to start shifting resources to response, because you're not going to be 100% successful. We saw that with Israel and Iran, right? So, 300, but a few still got through, right? So you've got to start shifting budget to response. So number 2, because data is the new currency, right, out there, and we're, the volume of data that we're collecting and pulling together, and especially in this region, data privacy and compliance is going to be crucial for, 1, the responsibility that we have for that data, but number 2, the financial impacts if we don't. So we've got to get in tune with that and make sure that our actions and systems that comply with those legal and compliance issues. And finally, because of all of this rapid change and all the technologies that I just talked about, the speed at which we're going to deal with technology obsolescence and the need to adapt, existing technology infrastructure to these new technologies is going to be just a big challenge for organizations, right? And so those are kind of the top three, cybersecurity threats, data privacy, technology obsolescence, and managing that I see. But then there are opportunities that come with that, right? And there's no question, and I'm been doing a lot of speaking and education with broad class of companies and people around artificial intelligence, especially in the machine learning area. And so that's going to transform everything. It's going to impact our business. It's going to impact the way that we operate in this combined operation of protecting our assets, but it's also going to impact us, right, as people, right? So that is, I would say a huge opportunity, and one that all of us need to spend time. It's not magic, it's just math, right? And get our heads around not only applying it, but also understanding the consequences of that technology. The other one that we don't talk about much, but I think is also a critical opportunity because it's such a major enabler, and that is the rollout of 5G, but more importantly, satellite broadband, which will provide ubiquitous connectivity across the entire globe at broadband speeds. And that's already evolving, and in the next 3 to 5 years is even going to be just more pervasive. This means that we're going to have always on, everywhere communications. And so how that's going to impact all aspects of our life, which means for us, security and protecting is going to be huge. And then the final one that's kind of been floating and evolving down at a lower level, but I think is a major opportunity and is growing, and I'm seeing it in several new implementations. And that's, blockchain, right? But more importantly, the distributed ledger technologies. And what that's going to do is help facilitate with this ubiquitous broadband capability with AI and machine learning to have more systematic data exchange and attribution and control of information when we do transactional activities across this very broad network. And so those are the kind of technology risks and opportunities. Final one for me that organizations aren't paying attention to and need to get ahead of, and that's the rapid development of quantum computing and its impact on encryption and cryptography. And in very short order, our traditional, especially asymmetric cryptography as far as encryption technology will become useless. And so we're going to have to be transitioning to these, kind of what we call post-quantum cryptography. So planning that now, upgrading, the strength of existing encryption technologies, but more importantly, getting ready for the advent of quantum computing. And as someone talked about, dealing with espionage and those kinds of things, that's going to be incredibly important because that's how we primarily protect access to this information. So that's my pitch.
Thank you. That was, very comprehensive, yet it gives the audience, I'm very sure, several areas to focus on in their respective, immediate to medium term, so as to make security and risk management more effective and optimal. Thank you so much, Bruce. My next question is to Mark, if he is comfortable.
I'm still here. I'm still
Still,
alive.
yeah. Right,
Still alive.
right.
Thank you so much, sir. Shukran. Good afternoon. Yeah,
Mark,
I'm
you
still
brought out an important point that because of financial pressures, perhaps a lot of roles are being declared redundant. So the traditional or immediate or contemporary outlook towards security may perhaps not be very, very effective, given the set of challenges that you are seeing right now, UAE may see, and what the world may see. So in these kind of situations and in all this backdrop, the one that is immediately next to you and what we have just discussed, how can security be used as a enabler differently by organizations so that they end up making the organization more resilient, both from the business as well as people perspectives?
Yeah, so
What is it that we need to do differently now on?
Yeah, I mean, this comes down to the basic fundamentals of security and the securitization of both your business, your product, your financial profile, your intellectual property, everything from bottom up. You can go from anyone that's a sole trader who will have their own interests at heart and will securitize their own economic well-being and safety and security alongside their entrepreneurial skill sets, etc., but will place risk caveats around what they do and how they do it, and which jurisdictions they work in and for what purpose, and having that risk tolerance in place, because that's what security is all about anyway, isn't it? Risk mitigation, risk tolerance, and being able to securitize people, places, and things. And for businesses, as they evolve, their complexity gets much, much, much greater. And with complexity, the forgotten element is in the main securitization of all of the above. Bruce was speaking a moment ago about data, cryptography, the technological components of it. People are very quick to sell at the moment, but not necessarily understand that a majority of multinational corporations see security as a center. So the CFO won't really be considering the physical security, the IP security, all of the above things. They'll be more thinking in terms of lines of how can we safeguard our financial risks, i.e. where do we put our big bets? So hence your risk officer is typically from an accountancy base. And that then flows through to the rest of the securitization piece, because they're seen as kind of conflicting objectives. So the chief risk officer or the accountant, especially within financial institutions et al., then has a little bit of a conflict of minds with that security officer who is then seen as your traditional security actor, rather than the bigger piece of securitization for the betterment of the organization. Because securitization for the betterment of the organization also enables better business. It enables better opportunities. It enables better products. It enables management. So I'm a project management professional as well, within my cadre of letters after my name. And a big component of that is risk management and the securitization of the product and of the project and of the portfolio. And all of those nice things that many people talk about, mostly off the back of an Excel spreadsheet or a Gantt chart. But when it is put into practice and there are costs associated with it, those costs deviate quite rapidly because they want to get rid of them. And at the moment, I think what we're seeing, and anybody that checks their LinkedIn quite frequently will see a lot of very, very experienced, very competent, very professional individuals who unfortunately have been placed on the breadline. And that is extremely unfortunate, and it's in the name of restructuring, merging, and changing up an organization. But it will come back round again. security for me is the linchpin. I've been in security since my teenage years, then went on to military and went back into security, and then went into law enforcement, and the rest is kind of history. But I know it from a practical viewpoint, I know it from an academic viewpoint, and I know it from an administrational viewpoint and a leadership viewpoint. And technology, the data components of that, as Bruce was quite rightly saying, as a secondary artifice, from a business perspective, mostly get dealt with in terms of business intelligence, and not necessarily geared towards that securitization piece. So my role within Thomson Reuters, the last kind of multinational that I was part of, and I was a director in, I used to be the face of special intelligence. Wholehearted, some of the best special intelligence that I've ever known, from military, government, and a load of other sources, open source. But the thing is, organizations, i.e. other multinational organizations or otherwise, weren't willing to open their wallet to understand what could possibly be facing them in terms of a risk exposure and security exposure, because again, it's a cost center. So from my perspective, the enablement of businesses is done through security. A profit revenue stream is done through security, and through risk mitigation and risk management. And the technology is available that is actually integral to security and risk management as well. All of what I was saying a moment ago in relation to project management and program management, project management, whatever you want to call it these days, is the majority of that is in relation to risk and in relation to security and the securitization of people, places, and things. And that goes for technology as well. As Bruce quite rightly said, in terms of cryptography, that is going to change in the next few years through that quantum computing piece. I spoke on that yesterday at the International Arbitration and ADR Resolution Conference here in Dubai, albeit online, unfortunately, due to the weather. But it is a massive piece, and it will be greatly impactful upon what are currently the key technological components to keep your data safe. So there's a lot going on at the moment, and businesses, I certainly feel, aren't quite taking security as seriously as they need to do. So I'll leave it there for the moment. I've whittled on quite a bit.
Right. Thanks, Mark. That was, very insightful. The sentiment is shared, I think, across industry, and that is why we always at MidCat profess that security professionals need not look only at security. One has to get themselves educated, certified, exposed to, made aware about risk management, per se. Very traditionally, we feel that, okay, once I have understood security, let me try and get into business continuity management. Once I am, comfortable in business continuity management, let me take the next step. Maybe, crisis management, going forward to resilience, right? But I think the time now for our industry is ripe that everyone ab initio enhances one's understanding of all these aspects, so that they stand a better chance of being the CRO rather than someone from an accounting background and accounting perspective taking up that very responsible position while not focusing on many other important aspects such as securitization. So, Ankit, now, we mentioned business continuity management, we mentioned resilience, and we've also, as Mark highlighted, there are, gaps in understanding of these aspects in organizations. So can we say that, after having been in BCM for such a long time, that the traditional way of looking at BCM also, not only security, BCM also, is kind of fraught with pitfalls. What worked, say, 10 years ago in BCM or 5 years ago in BCM may not really be as effective as desired going forward. And, in case you had to profess 3 to 4 to 5 things that BCM professionals and resilience professionals need to do differently from what they have been over the last 5 years, what would you advise?
Thank you. That's actually a very interesting space, Sandeep. So first and foremost, I think from an industry standpoint, definitely BCM is going changes which are like leaps and bounds, going to transform the entire space. AI and ML, as was talked about, is similarly, cybersecurity threats. These are all, they have been around for quite some time, but now I think we are really seeing that point of inflection wherein the technology is becoming cheap enough and commonplace enough for everybody to use. So if I look at it from a perspective of somebody who's been in business continuity or resilience, I think first and foremost, the risk is that organizations do not necessarily have the structures to deal with what's coming at them. And the flip side to that is we will require high amount of adaptability and agility. And this goes hand in hand with how do we actually carve out the different roles and different functions. Do we actually visualize and imagine new pieces altogether which didn't exist? Because bear in mind, before 9/11, emergency response and business continuity wasn't a space at all. It only picked up pace after 9/11 and similar sort of attacks over the years. So we are going to see an entirely different set of roles getting reimagined and repurposed also. So that's definitely point number one. Because from an organization standpoint, sometimes we can get limited by how we can respond, but the adversary, whether it's any of these threats, don't really have such a limitation. They can throw anything and everything at us at the same time as part of a poly crisis. The second thing which I want to talk about is the human element. I think people haven't really understood that whilst the entire COVID-19 period and the years thereafter were really a very low point in terms of the amount of activity that was going on in the industry across the globe, travel and many other sectors got hit. But from a crisis management perspective, whether you were a security professional or you were a crisis professional or even a travel security or anybody else, the amount of work exponentially increased. So what we have witnessed, and there are many researchers, I don't want to quote numbers, is the amount of burnout amongst crisis responders is really, really high. And at this point in time, in fact, many of the researchers are pointing out that people are really wary of taking up roles in information security or SIM SOCs or any of these, because the amount of responsibility and accountability is really high, and the amount of information that they're having to process and the kind of low tolerance that management has for some of these challenges is actually completely different. So I think from a perspective of human element, we need to also prioritize the burnout amongst crisis responders and focus a lot more also on personal resilience of these people. Anybody, whether they have an explicit or an inherent role around risk management, crisis management, business continuity, resilience, any of these spaces or any overlapping spaces, this should become a part and parcel of how they really work things through. So that's, I think, the second point. The third point, which is also both an enabler as well as it creates its own challenges, is that I also see AI as a tool which is going to amplify the noise a lot. While it has the ability to really help us get through a lot of data very quickly, it has the assistive ability to get us components which will help us bring context, which will help us get some understanding. At the same time, from a perspective of resilience professionals, it's going to amplify noise to a level that's never really been seen before. And we're already seeing a lot of instances of it in different elections across the globe, wherein both dis and misinformation is being created. And going forward, I only see an exponential increase because the technology is getting cheaper. The 5G and the satellite broadband is getting even more available. From a perspective of open source technology that anybody can leverage and use to create things, that's getting faster. And unless you really have the human element bringing in an amount of context, and a classic example is content that's right now on X or Twitter. And until you really don't have the user moderation saying this seems to be an altered video or this seems to be from a different event, from a perspective of working with people and their emotions and how they look at that information and whether they should act on it or not, I think the job of crisis responders, resilience professionals is going to be a lot more difficult, because they'll first have to filter out all the noise, then focus on what they're really doing, then filter out all of the narrative, because essentially we are working in neutral workplaces, and then be able to take that action. On the contrary, management is expecting real-time information because they're also seeing a lot of this information real time. So I think the three elements from my perspective will be, how do we adapt our organizational structures towards extreme adaptability and agility? The second element, how do we look at the human element, whether it's the burnout of the crisis responders, talent management, staffing, burnouts? And the third element is, how do we look at evolving technology like AI, and so that it doesn't become yet another threat in amplifying noise. So even from my perspective, I think there will be new departments that will be coming up, and I actually think of a separate SME vertical for just dealing with AI and AI related initiatives, which will most likely get introduced if it's not already a commonplace thing. And it may not necessarily only be limited to an IT intervention. It would require a much larger intervention across the organization silos and bringing it together. So that's, I think, the top 3 or 4 that I'm looking at it right now. Thanks, Sandeep.
Right. Great points, Ankit. I will take the liberty, Bruce, to ask you one question as a follow-on to something I feel was very important in what Ankit just said. AI in OSINT for misinformation, disinformation, conditioned narratives, false narratives. How serious is that problem going to be over the next 5 years? Bruce, I think you're on mute. Bruce, you will have to unmute yourself.
Okay. One, it's already a serious problem. Number 2, it's going to blow our minds on what we're going to see come at us, not in 5 years, but in years, 1, 2, 3. It'll be massive.
Right. Probably that's the reason why, several governments are trying to work around creating frameworks and industry guidances to prevent such, threats, which we know we are already
I don't know if we'll be able to
facing the brunt
prevent,
of.
but we can counter as best we can. Yep.
Yes. With 70% of the world democratic population going in for elections, I think this problem is very, very clear, present, and severe. Great. So I think this has been a very, very, educative and enlightening discussion. I think we are reaching the end of our time slot. So therefore, I will request each one of the speakers to give their, final takeaway or the last golden words before Mithun steps in as guidance to industry or forewarning. Sure. Yes, Bruce, starting with you.
Okay, so I'm going to bring it to us, and I'm going to say, broaden your professional skills, learn about the aspects of all the protective disciplines, right? And by continually learning and continually adapting, you and your organization will be better equipped for the disruptions that are going to become present. And that's for your career and for your organizational resilience.
Great. Thank you so much, Bruce. Mark, your last words in gold.
Yeah, don't stay cost center. Understand what the business is about that you're operating within, and merge your vocabulary with that specific business plan and tone at the top. Because if you don't get that and you fight and lobby for the securitization of your business, you're not going to be in the securitization of your business that much longer. So that's what I would say. Either that or lobby with a very powerful security membership organization that speaks to executives at the top and form a voice to really get security back on the agenda. Thank you.
Great points, Mark. Speak the business language and form a voice that addresses the tone at the top. Ankit, your final comments.
Thank you. So echoing what Bruce said and taking it a step further, I think from my perspective, we can't really wait for changes to dictate what we want to do. We should be change makers because already, for example, ISO standards like 42001 are in the making and they're going to become more and more prevalent. So a lot of times crisis professionals, resilience professionals, like Mark also very rightly pointed out, are seen as cost centers. I think this is the time that we can really set the narrative and we can really create an interdisciplinary approach after we have learned and we have grown into a different stream of professionals. What that will be called, I don't know, but we have an ability now to shape the future and kind of step into it the way we want it.
Right. Great. I think this was a fantastic takeaway. And with that, I think Mithun is visually telling me to hand back control to him. So Bruce, Mark, and Ankit, thank you so very much for being part of this panel and sharing such pearls of wisdom. Thank you so very much, Mark. We are now concerned about you, and do ping us once you are home. And very courageous, responsible of you to keep up the participation despite the conditions you are in. But then that is the hallmark of what you have been doing all these years. Being in the security, crisis, and risk management field. Really respected, what you've done. So with that, I am very sure that all the audience would have taken away some great learnings and something that is actionable and something that they can start deploying tomorrow. With that, Mithun, I will hand over the virtual podium back to you, and we will go as per your guidance. Thank you so much, Bruce, Ankit, and Mark.
Thanks, Mr. Sandeep Sinha, and thanks to all the panelists for sticking to your timelines and contributing to such a rich and enriching discourse. Now I'd like to invite Lieutenant Colonel Sushil Pradhan to share closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Mithun. Thank you, everyone who've been speaking for the last few hours now. General Sharma, I see you there. Would you like to have any closing remarks in case you want to sum up what you heard through the afternoon?
I'd like to sum up because there was so much rich content that it will be very difficult for me to sum up. But 2-3 sentences which I picked up, which I want to share is, one is that we must build operational resilience of a very high order. Now, that is the order of the day which comes out. Secondly, we must be agile because things are changing so dramatically. The agility of corporations become to be very, very relevant. Thirdly, embrace technology, exploit technology, love technology, just go out and do that. And what I liked about another thing was understand the fake world, try and authenticate news, try and find out real addictive news, where the news is. And finally, we must build systems where we can predict what's going to happen rather than react for it, because prediction is going to be the important part of the next generation of security vectors, which are increasing manifold. But I still feel security professionals have a big role to play as we go forward and deal with security threats. And I think if we keep ourselves abreast and alert, we can still handle it and be ahead of the curve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And I think, as you mentioned, there has been such a wide variety of topics being spoken about that it's really difficult to sort of sum up everything into 5 minutes. But I'll just try and pick out some of the highlights. And what is really heartening to see is that we've been at it for the last 3 hours now, and we still have over 110 people in the audience. Still, at one time, we had 200 plus, and that's really an encouraging sign. And it was wonderful to see people joining in from so many different continents and time zones, from Asia Pacific to Europe to Middle East to the Americas, and of course, Africa, where we had people joining in from there. So very broadly, if I want to just say, what we talked about, we had 3 panel discussions that covered the entire gamut of risks. Obviously, the focus of today's discussion was the EMEA region and the risks and opportunities that it presents to the world. But we set the stage in the first panel by starting with an overview of the global risk scenario, where we had Farah, who spoke about the intertwining of geopolitics and geoeconomics. We had David Rubens, who spoke about pattern recognition and unprecedented risks. Then we had Malcolm Smith, who spoke about informed decision making and how we can sort of go back to basics if we need to decode and decipher what the risks are going to be. Rachel Spenton spoke about the viable targets in energy security and how energy security also dictates geopolitics. Lloyd Figgins spoke about espionage and travel risk as one of the new emerging risks that he identified. And of course, he did spell out the various methods of travel risk management and travel risk mitigation. In the second panel, Shraddha, our eminent moderator from from Dubai, she spoke with a panel discussion where Sarhad spoke about the economic integration and interoperability that we need to develop to be successful in the EMEA region. Mr. Sunil Sinha spoke about the opportunities, the technology, the logistics, tourism, also the identifying various trends in economic diversification and demography. He also spoke about the various growing regions and what are the peculiarities of each of those regions. Victoria spoke about the various risks and opportunities in the African continent and said that good governance is going to be key to successful exploitation of the region. The last panel which just concluded was moderated by Sandeep, where again we had such a wide gamut of technology, risks and opportunities being covered. So I will not go into a lot of those details. Suffice to say that Ankit summed up by saying be change makers and take technology opportunities as they come. Bruce touched upon new trends like quantum computing and also spoke about how AI is going to be the new electricity or is already the new electricity. And Mark, of course, spoke about various aspects of security and technology while riding on the flood hit streets of Dubai, and spoke about securitization of products and how good risk management will come with good technology management. So I really do not have much to say because the speakers spoke with so much of passion, gave such valid examples from their own lives, from their own experiences, that it was really wonderful to hear. And thank you, audience, for being so patient and sticking around with us for the entire 2.5, 3 hours that we've been at it. Thank you so much, all the panelists once again. And we really look forward to having you with us in such virtual events or live events in the future. Shraddha, are you there? We would want you to come up on the stage as well. Thank you so much. So with that, Mithun, back to you for closure.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Pradhan. So again, thanks to one and all again for joining us today, this evening. Please, I'd appeal to all of you to please like, share, and subscribe to MidCat Advisory on LinkedIn and Twitter and other social media platforms. This conference was live streamed, and the link is available on LinkedIn. You can obtain the recordings and see them even after we finish. We'd also request you to stay in touch on social media so that we can collaborate and work together in the future. I would also like to inform participants that participation certificates will be made available shortly. And I already see questions and queries related to data surfer in the chat box. So again, as I'd plugged in earlier, I request you to connect with Mr. Kunal Solanki. The contacts have been provided in the chat box. So I think that's it from my end, and good afternoon and evening to one and all. And thanks for joining us today for this enriching seminar. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mithun. Well conducted. Thank you, Sushil. God bless all.
Thank you, sir. Thank